Jackson child molestation case. Word coming to us from the courtroom in Santa Maria, California, that the jury, which has been deliberating this case now since Friday week last, has reached a verdict in the Michael Jackson child molestation case. Now, Michael Jackson has 1 hour from the announcement that a verdict has been reached to get to the courtroom, and so he presumably will be preparing to leave his Neverland Ranch now. We're expecting that the verdict will be read in an hour's time. It is now just after 8:37 here in London time. That is just after 12:37 midday in California. Michael Jackson presumably making preparations to leave the Neverland Ranch to go to the California courtroom, the courtroom being, of course, in Santa Maria, to hear the awaited verdict in his trial on child molestation charges. Now, let's join our sister network, CNN USA, to bring us up to date. Ted Rowland's outside the courtroom speaking now. The accuser's transcript read back in part on Friday, and then there was more readbacks again today. They had a question of the judge today. Clearly, they were making their decision, and one could maybe assume that over the weekend, some of these jurors came to grips with which way they were going to be going.
Ted, for those of us who haven't watched it as closely as you have, does this end up a he said sort of case, or was there direct evidence? What kind of case was presented by the prosecution?
Oh, clearly it's a he said, and which is common in a molestation trial. What is very stark are the differences. The differences here are two separate stories. Now I'm being told that the verdict will be read at 1:30 Pacific time. That is what the court has indicated, that at 1:30 Pacific time this verdict will be read. In this case is unique because the prosecution has alleged that Michael Jackson is a monster, a child molester that used Neverland Ranch to lure his prey in, and then he developed his prey, if you will, and then abused them. They used accusations from back in 93 and 94 and talked about Michael Jackson and presented potential evidence of Michael Jackson fitting that characterization. On the other side, Thomas Mesereau, the defense lawyer, presented a Michael Jackson as a victim, saying that this family, this accuser, this young boy, was trying to shake down this international superstar, and they used examples of this family's history. They really did, on the defense case, put this family on trial. This family was involved in another lawsuit against J.C. Penney years ago, where the defense alleged they lied in similar fashion. So it's up to this jury, and this jury has mulled this over now. Which of these two drastically different stories do you believe? There's not a lot of wiggle room here at all for this jury. Either you believe this young lad or you don't, and you think that Michael Jackson is either guilty or a victim himself.
Ted, it's been a little while since I've covered a court case, but I do remember that in the days between the end of the trial and the verdict, there was always a lot of quarterbacking in the hallways by other lawyers, sometimes by the lawyers themselves. Was there a sense of who did better in this, was it the prosecution, the prosecuting of this case, or the defense?
Well, I tell you that, there's 2,000 plus members of the media covering this. Everything that was said in court has been analyzed ad nauseum. And I would say that most people believe that the prosecution and the defense put on wonderful cases using the evidence available. There's not a lot of evidence in a child molestation case. It's the child's word against the adult's word. That said, the level of prosecution and the level that Thomas Mesereau had on the defense side was incredible, and it really did make for the 3 months to go a little bit quicker for courtroom watchers and those of us in the courtroom. And I think that by and large people agree that this is a tough one. People walked out scratching their head. It could go either way. Usually you have a sense, usually you think, oh, I bet he'll be guilty, or I'll bet he's not guilty, and it's a surprise verdict. Either way, I think this could go not guilty or guilty on any one of these 10 counts.
Ted, we want to remind our viewers of what you have just said, which is that we expect to hear what the verdict is. 1:30 your time out on the West Coast. That's 4:30, obviously, on the East Coast. Let me move you along and ask you about what is Michael Jackson facing here? What are the punishment in terms of these counts that he is up against?
Well, he has the first count, we'll just go 1 through 10. The first count is a conspiracy charge, and the allegation here is that he and some co-conspirators tried to keep this family at bay after the Martin Bashir documentary was played, and the reason was because they were considered a public relations nightmare. A difficult charge to prove in this case because there was not a lot of evidence. And the conventional wisdom by the people covering the trial and attorneys that are covering it is that this is the toughest one for the prosecution, and it may go Jackson's way more so than the other ones. Then you get into 4 counts of molestation. 2 of them were from the witness himself, the alleged victim himself. The accuser got up and detailed 2 separate molestation acts at the hands of Michael Jackson. The other 2 are eyewitness accounts from the accuser's brother, his younger brother, who had some problems on the stand in terms of contradicting himself, and whether or not this jury believes, especially the brother, will be very interesting to see. Then you have 4 alcohol charges, which allege that Michael Jackson used alcohol to furtherance his crime, to use alcohol to basically ply these young boys, or this one alleged victim, into a state of intoxication so that his job would be easier, if you will, to molest him. That is what is alleged here. Jurors have the option on the alcohol charges to say, we don't think it was used in a molestation scenario, but we think he gave him alcohol, and that would be a misdemeanor. So if they don't believe that Jackson is guilty of the molestation, they could still find him guilty of the alcohol. There is one other molestation charge on the table, and that is an attempted molestation, and that was alleged by the accuser as well. There's a gamut in terms of which way this jury can go. They could come through with a split verdict, guilty on some charges and not on others. The bottom line for Michael Jackson, if he's found guilty of any of the sexual molestation charges, he will most likely be taken into custody immediately. His bail will be taken away, and it will go to the Santa Barbara County Jail until sentencing. There's 20 days are allowed. A defendant has a right to 20 days before they are sentenced. Usually they waive that time. But he will not walk out of this courthouse when those black SUVs pull up here, presumably they do. It may be the last time for Michael Jackson to be a free man, depending on which way this jury goes.
Ted Rollins, who's been watching this for us throughout the trial. Ted, stand by a minute. We want to go on the phone now. We have our CNN legal analyst, Jeffrey Toobin, with us. Jeffrey, this has got to be the time when a defense attorney's stomach is churning.
Oh, everybody's stomach is churning, but especially the defendant. You know, there's an old line about defendant and his client where defendant gets convicted and he says, "What do we do now?" And the lawyer says, "What do you mean we?" I mean, this is really Michael Jackson, whose life is potentially really in jeopardy. And you know, the decision is made, and we just need to hear what it is.
You know, a lot has been made with talk about the circus that's been surrounding this trial, but from what you've been able to see inside the courtroom, has that circus atmosphere been largely absent? Has this been tried pretty much like any other case?
Well, I don't think a trial where Jay Leno and Chris Tucker testifies is like any other case, but I do think the circus charge has been somewhat overstated. Judge Melville, I think, has kept a tight rein on the proceedings. Many people thought this trial would last 6 months. It didn't. It lasted, less than 4 of courtroom time. So I think it was an orderly and fair trial. And outside, at the beginning of the trial, there were a lot of people, and right now in Santa Maria there are a lot of people. But during the trial, many days there were hardly any spectators at all. So I think you can get somewhat of a misimpression of the circus if you only focus on the most extreme elements of that charge.
Let me ask you about he said trials. In the case where there is no direct evidence, is there a way that a jury tends to go? Has there been any sort of look at these kinds of trials where the jury is more sympathetic toward the victim or more sympathetic toward the defendant, or is it just impossible to categorize?
Well, the key factor in cases where there is essentially a swearing contest, people, one person's word against the other, is corroboration. Does one side, can they corroborate the story? And that's why the key part of this trial, I think, was the so-called 1108 evidence, the California provision of evidence of law of evidence, which allowed the prosecution to bring in evidence of 4 other or 5 other boys who claimed they were molested. I think that was enormously important. And if Michael Jackson's convicted, that's going to be the reason he's convicted.
Okay.
Let me bring in another legal analyst we have here on the phone with us, Kendall Coffey. Kendall, when you look at this trial of 14 weeks of testimony and arguments, 7 days of jury deliberation, put me in the place of both the prosecuting attorney and the defense attorney right about now. What are they doing?
Well, nervous as can be. I think the prosecution is probably cautiously optimistic that they're going to get some convictions on at least some of the major counts. I say that because while it was a 7-day deliberation, given the kind of case it is, the number of counts, the complexity of the conspiracy count, as well as the various jury instructions on that, I can see prosecutors feeling pretty good about the prospect that this is a jury that was very, very careful, but worked its way through the evidence, and apparently the recent readbacks that this jury was asking for were of the alleged victim himself. And at the end of the day, this case is not about Jay Leno, Chris Tucker, or even the accused victim's mom. It's about the believability of the alleged victim. If they believe the accuser, they are to convict the alleged abuser, and that may be what the prosecution is thinking right now.
Let me put the same question to you that I asked Jeffrey Toobin a minute ago, and that is, in cases where there is two swearing different things, do juries tend to feel more empathetic toward a victim? Does that hold sway in the deliberations?
I think victims have an edge because you get right down to it. There's not necessarily an obvious reason for them to lie. There is always a reason for defendants to deny. A little different here because the defense did a very skillful job of portraying the alleged accuser, in particular the mom and the family, as basically scrambling and scheming with a massive con trying to hit the jackpot for millions of dollars. But when it's all said and done, I think that right now the Jackson camp's got to be even more nervous than the prosecution. Again, I think it's going to come down to the alleged victim. And he seemed to be in sort of the close of this trial, somebody that the jury was starting to believe.
So at this point, if I were to ask you who you thought tried the better case, sounds to me like you think the prosecution did a better job of laying out its case.
I think the defense did an incredible job in terms of everything they were dealing with, and I think the prosecution made a lot of mistakes along the way. But so many times it comes to a strong close, and I thought the prosecution's closing, both in terms of the oral argument to the jury and some of the things they focused on right at the very end, were extremely, extremely effective. And the one thing the defense didn't do is really explain Michael Jackson and Neverland. He seems incredibly strange, incredibly weird, and the prosecution had an explanation for that he is a Pied Piper leading young boys into a predator's lair. What the defense didn't really do, perhaps as much as they could have, would have, should have done, is explain why this was an innocent Peter Pan portraying childhood fantasies. I don't think the jury necessarily got comfortable with Michael Jackson, and it becomes much easier, if that's the case, to believe the prosecution's explanation for this very, very unusual person and this bizarre setup at Neverland.
It's pretty obvious that if there is a finding of not guilty, that Michael Jackson walks free, and that's the end of that. Walk me through what legal remedies are still open to a defendant should there be any kind of guilty verdict on any of these 10 counts.
Well, the first issue is going to be whether he's immediately remanded. That means straight to jail as opposed to being at liberty while the judge deals with sentencing, and even while perhaps the Jackson defense team pursues an appeal. That's a very large issue, and I think the judge is going to listen closely to the prosecution's position on that. If they very heavily insist that Jackson be immediately remanded, making the argument that that's normally what is done with convicted child molesters. And by the way, Jackson is an international figure with international access, and Roman Polanski, as we all recall, another alleged child abuser, has been in Paris these many years. So I think if the prosecution makes a strong enough push that Jackson could very well be remanded if convicted of some of the serious charges. And beyond that, there's going to be motions for new trial. If the defense loses, there's certainly going to be huge issues at sentencing. The way California law works, that if Jackson were convicted of multiple charges, again, nobody has any idea what this jury is going to do at this point. But if he were convicted of multiple charges, the judge has a lot to say about whether particular sentences run consecutively, which means more time is added on for each sentence, or whether they're run concurrently, which means that during the same period he is effectively serving one sentence, he would simultaneously be serving other sentences. Obviously, a huge difference in terms of the ultimate amount of prison exposure, and something which the judge has a lot of discretion to decide.
We want to remind our viewers, first of all, you've been partaking of the wisdom of Kendall Coffey, a former U.S. attorney, a legal analyst. Kendall, let me ask you to stand by just a second, because I want to go to CNN's Brooke Anderson, who is standing outside Neverland. We do know that Michael Jackson was given an hour after the time that the jury announced it had a verdict to go from wherever he was to the courthouse. Let me ask you, Brooke, is there any sign that Michael Jackson is indeed at Neverland?
Candy, that's a great question, and we have been monitoring the gate here at Neverland, the front gate. We have seen no comings and goings of his motorcade this morning. We have been told all along that Jackson is waiting here for the verdict with his friends and family, but we were told that by his former spokeswoman, Raymond Bain, and she was fired over the weekend, so it's been difficult to get information. It has been between 15-20 minutes since it was announced the verdict has come down. Like you said, the judge has given him 1 hour to get to the courthouse. The courthouse in Santa Maria, about 30 miles away. That's about a 30 to 40 minute drive. So we do expect, if he is here, he does need to be leaving pretty soon. Candy, if he leaves, it could be a really long time if he ever comes back to Neverland. If he does come back to Neverland, if he's sentenced on any of the charges, the punishment could vary widely from probation to 18 years and 8 months in prison. The judge could remand him immediately into custody if he assumes he is a flight risk or a danger to the community. But again, we don't know if he is here for certain. And then if he is and he goes to the courthouse, if he's acquitted, he could be back later on this afternoon.
So what sort of activity have you seen throughout the day? I'm not even sure how long you've been out there, if you've been out there every day since the trial started. Has he been coming in and out over the past week while the jury's been deliberating?
I have been here since during the closing arguments, so a week and a half or so, and he has been back and forth, especially during the closing arguments. We would see when his convoy would arrive, he would roll down the window and wave to fans as he came in and out. But during jury deliberations, when the motorcade would leave and when it would come back, the windows were rolled up, very tinted. We could not see in the windows. Activity as far as fans, a handful of fans here now behind me. As the day progresses, as we've seen, more and more fans would come here after the jury would go home from deliberations. But I believe the activity with the fans is at the courthouse right now as they await for Jackson's arrival from wherever he is right now. It could be here, it could not be.
Brooke Anderson, who is standing outside Neverland, home of Michael Jackson. I'm sure you'll stand by since you've been there for a week and a half. I want to go back to the courthouse now, where we have CNN's Ted Rowlands. Ted, have you seen any of the principals coming into the courtroom? What's changed since last we talked?
Well, just a few minutes ago, I saw Mag Nicolas, an assistant district attorney, arrive in his vehicle. They had to part the waves of crowds to allow him to come in and get inside the courthouse. Presumably, Tom Sneddon, the district attorney here, is already inside, along with the other attorneys, because they have had some conferences. In fact, there was one today, this morning, with both sides. So only one new face, if you will, in the last few minutes. The crowd seems to be not at its highest level, but definitely at one of its highest frenzied levels, if you will. There's a lot of anticipation here and a sense of nervousness as well outside the courthouse to see what happens here. After waiting and waiting, the time is fast approaching where these Michael Jackson supporters will see whether or not their idol is going to be found guilty or not guilty. The media is penned up, the folks that will be going into the courtroom off to the right here. You won't be able to see it, but they will be going in the next few minutes, all trying to get a good seat so that they can document this and document the reaction of all of the players as the verdicts are read.
Ted, let me ask you about some of those people that we're seeing. Is this essentially the same crowd that comes every day? Who are these people?
There are a core group that, in fact, one individual left his home in Tennessee and has been here every day since Michael Jackson made his first court appearance. But the bulk of the folks are coming on vacation. They're coming from all over the world. People will spend a week here, maybe a few days here, maybe a few hours here. People are just sort of stopping by to get a glimpse of it. And then there are the hardcore base groups of Michael Jackson supporters, the locals that have been here with regularity, and then the folks that have come from around the world that do spend considerable time here and have made multiple trips. Clearly, 95% of the people outside this courthouse on any given day are pro-Michael Jackson supporters. They bring signs, they chant, they can't wait for him to get out of his black SUV. They go crazy, and he always turns and waves to them. One quick acknowledgement, and that seems to be enough for them. They're fenced off, they're barricaded off, and today there is a line of police officers that will be between them and the courthouse when this is read.
Ted, let me first remind our viewers that you have told us that we are expecting the verdict to be given roughly half an hour from now, 1:30 your time, 4:30 on the East Coast. So we are waiting for that in roughly half an hour. And let's recap again. Can you walk me through the 10 counts that are against Michael Jackson at this point?
Well, assuming the court is on schedule and they don't allow for any sort of delay, at 1:30 Pacific time, there will be an audio feed that we will be able to hear outside the courtroom and broadcast. The judge allowed for this audio feed. We'll hear the court clerk, Lorna Fry, detail each and every count. She'll go starting with count 1, which is conspiracy. She'll say, we, the members of the jury, find that Michael Joe Jackson is guilty or not guilty of conspiracy. And then she will go on. If he is found not guilty, that'll be it. If he is found guilty of conspiracy, she will then detail whether or not is guilty of child abduction, false imprisonment, or extortion as an arm of that conspiracy charge. Next up will be count 2, and this really will tell us whether or not this jury believes the defense or if they believe this young man who has accused Michael Jackson of molestation. Counts 2, 3, 4, and 5 are all counts of lewd acts on a child. Two of the counts 2 and 3, are alleged by the accuser. Counts 3 and 4 are alleged by the accuser's brother. He says that he saw Michael Jackson with his hand touching his brother one late evening while his brother was sleeping. That accounts for 3 and 4. Count 5 is an attempted commitment of lewd act on a child. And then counts 6, 7, 8, and 9 have to do with alcohol. They are administering alcohol as an agent to further the lewd act. Jurors have a choice with the alcohol charges. They can either find Michael Jackson not guilty on all counts, or they can find him not guilty of using alcohol to commit molestation, but guilty of providing alcohol to someone who is underage. That is a misdemeanor, and many people think that if this jury finds him not guilty across the board, they may find him guilty of providing alcohol to minors. The sentence there is a year in county jail. The chance that the judge would remand him to custody on just that would be very slim. He would most likely be able to go free on bail until he is sentenced. There's a wide range in terms of what this jury can do and what this judge can do when it comes time for sentencing.
Ted Rowlands, I know you will stand by for us. Kendall Coffey, legal analyst, also standing by. And of course, our Jeffrey Toobin, our CNN political analyst. And what we want to do is continue with CNN's live coverage. That verdict in about half an hour. Our coverage continues right now with Wolf Blitzer.
Thanks very much, Candy. About 30 minutes or so from now, give or take a few minutes, the verdict will be in. Michael Jackson Guilty or not guilty, the various options before this jury, they've been deliberating now for the past couple of weeks. Jeffrey Toobin is with us here in our Washington studio. You've been watching this trial very closely. Jeffrey, give our viewers a sense right now of the enormity of what is about to happen in the life of Michael Jackson.
Well, I mean, it's really simple, Wolf. You have one of the top, I would say, dozen most famous people in the world who perhaps a half hour from now may be in criminal custody, maybe go into prison. I mean, as Ted Rollins has said earlier, for several of these crimes, if he is convicted, it is very likely that his bail will be revoked if he is convicted, and he will receive a sentence of many years in prison. So Michael Jackson's freedom is not only at stake in some abstract sense, but concretely, he may be in custody before the hour is out.
And so if he is convicted on some of the more serious charges, the felony charges against him, he could be sent to jail right away. He wouldn't necessarily be released on bail as the appeal process begins.
Absolutely not. He will not be released pending appeal. However, his lawyer will argue for him to be released pending an appeal, and I expect a lengthy and passionate argument by Tom Mesereau if Jackson is convicted for granting him bail. But based on the way California law usually operates, given the seriousness of this crime, he will almost certainly be put in custody right away.
Which would be a dramatic change in the lifestyle of this pop star. Clearly something that he is not necessarily going to be able to accept easily, given his lifestyle, given his mentality, given what he's gone through over these years.
And given his physical condition. One of the things that was striking to me, having seen him at the beginning of the trial and at the end of the trial, is how Michael Jackson has physically deteriorated over the course of this trial. Remember, last January was the time that he hopped up on top of that SUV and did a little dance for his fans. Now, whatever you think of that little incident, it took a physically fit man to do it. He is a shell of that man a year and a half later. He walks with difficulty. He seems medicated. His skin is a terrible gray pallor. The deterioration in Michael Jackson has been considerable, and if you think about the possibility of prison, that could accelerate.
Stand by for a moment, Jeff. Brooke Anderson's over at Neverland Ranch in California. We see some aerial shots of some cars. I assume, Brooke, he's getting ready to leave Neverland to head over to the courthouse in Santa Maria. Is that what we're seeing right now?
Hi there, Wolf. I believe you were asking me if we're getting ready to see Michael Jackson leaving Neverland, and indeed we are. We are looking at aerial pictures of Jackson's motorcade. We see the black SUVs, which we have seen so often coming in and out of this gate during the trial and in and out during deliberations this past week and a half. It has been more than 30 minutes. It has been more than 30 minutes since the judge let everyone know that a verdict has come down. It's about a 30-mile drive from here to the courthouse, so it's about a 30 to 40-minute drive. So he needs to leave pretty soon to make that deadline of 1 hour. We are waiting there. There aren't too many fans out here. A couple fans are here. A lot of photographers are here. Everyone just waiting for the gates to open and for that motorcade to exit and head to Santa Maria.
Well, I think it's clear to say that they're not going to read the verdict until he is inside that courthouse in Santa Maria. They're going to wait for him to show up. It's clearly that could take at least a half an hour, Jeffrey Toobin, for him to make that drive from Neverland to Santa Maria.
Well, I mean, I think this is an example of how Michael Jackson's life may be about to change. Throughout this whole trial, there's been a lot of waiting for Michael, and the trial starts when Michael arrives, and he's getting ready. And you know what? Once you're in custody, you don't have the luxury of people waiting around for you. I mean, I know, I've been out there, I know the distances. There is no way he is going to get there by 4:30 Eastern time, but they will not read the verdict, as you point out, until he returns. So I think this is just an example of perhaps diva-like behavior that when you're in the custody of the California prison system is no longer an option.
I had heard, Jeffrey, that they were going to give the news media, the public, a 60 to 90-minute advance notification after the jury had reached the verdict. They would have 60 to 90 minutes to get everyone in place in order for the verdict to be read. in front of the defendant, in this particular case, Michael Jackson. So he might make that 90-minute deadline, if in fact there is a 90-minute deadline.
He might make 90, but given the way the tension surrounding these sorts of events, things tend to slow down a little bit, and I would be surprised if they make the 90. And certainly they won't make the 60.
The 4:30 Eastern was the 60-minute deadline, 5 p.m. Eastern, 2 p.m. on the West Coast, the 90-minute deadline. If, in fact, there is a 90-minute deadline, there's been some conflicting reports I've seen whether they would have 60 to 90 minutes to get going. The judge was irritated early on. I believe the first appearance by Michael Jackson when he showed up late. Presumably the judge would be irritated this time, but it's I don't know if it would be much of a deal at this late stage in the process.
Yeah. If Michael Jackson is convicted, the least of his problems is being a little late to court.
The whole nature. Let's review some of these charges against him. Count 1 is a felony violation of conspiracy involving 28 individual overt acts of child abduction, false imprisonment, and extortion. Those are very serious charges as we watch these pictures from Neverland, the black vehicles, the SUVs, the motorcade that's about to leave to head over to the courthouse. That first count is potentially the end as far as Michael Jackson's freedom is concerned.
All of the felony counts put him in great jeopardy. Count 1, as people listen, I think it is safe to say it was the weakest count against Michael Jackson. The charge, in layman's terms, was that Jackson and the people who worked for him conspired to keep the accuser and his family essentially prisoner in Neverland, around Neverland, in the period after the Martin Bashir documentary ran in 2003, to control them, to control the response to this documentary. The evidence against Jackson, I think it's safe to say, was very thin. There were other people involved in perhaps controlling the movements of the accuser's family, but there was precious little evidence that Jackson himself participated in that, and I think Jackson has the best chance of acquittal on that count.
The counts 2 through 5 involved lewd and lascivious acts upon a minor under 14 years of age. Counts 2 through 5.
That's the heart of the case. Those 4 counts are child molestation. The first 2 counts are based on the testimony of the accuser himself. The second 2 counts are based on the testimony of the accuser's brother, who claimed to see the accuser being molested by Jackson. But child molestation, counts 2 through 5, that's the heart of the case. If he's convicted of those carry the likely longest prison sentences, and I think, that's Jackson's greatest jeopardy.
We see the motorcade, some cars beginning to move. I think that's what we're seeing. The gates of Neverland Ranch have now opened. I suspect we're going to see some of those cars bringing Michael Jackson and his entourage from the Neverland Ranch, about 30 miles or so, to Santa Maria. That's where the courthouse is for the reading of the verdict in all of these counts. We'll see as this motorcade, I suspect, yeah, there it is. Those are the black SUVs. We assume Michael Jackson is inside one of those vehicles. They'll be driving out. In the past, do they get police escorts? Do you know, Jeff, when you've been out there?
They have not had police escorts for most of the journey. For when they get into Santa Maria, there's sometimes police cars that have escorted them. But one thing that's interesting to remember as we see this highly dramatic conclusion to the trial is that during the trial, there were many days when there were very few spectators and not a lot of attention, so there was really no need for a police escort. Here, of course, you have hundreds more people present around the courtroom than were there during the 16 weeks of the trial.
Count 6 involves an attempt to conduct a lewd act against a minor.
That's attempted child molestation. That is basically related to counts 2, 3, 4, and 5, part of the child molestation counts that are the heart of the case.
And then counts 7 through 10 are felony charges of administering an intoxicating agent to a minor in order to facilitate a felony. That's basically giving a minor an alcoholic beverage.
Right, giving a minor an alcoholic beverage in order to commit a felony. And what's interesting about counts 7 through 10 is that there is the possibility of what's called a lesser included offense. The jury could acquit Michael Jackson of the felony versions of providing alcohol to a minor, but convict him of misdemeanors. And if Michael Jackson is only convicted of misdemeanors, I don't think he will have his bail revoked, and I think he will count this trial as a win.
The court is now suggesting the verdict will be read at 4:45 Eastern, 1:45 p.m. on the West Coast, but we see this motorcade beginning slowly to move. I see 2 vehicles, 3 vehicles in this motorcade. I don't know how many vehicles altogether there will be, but it doesn't look like they have yet gone through the main gate at Neverland Ranch. On the left part of the screen, we see the ranch itself, the motorcade winding through, and here they come. These are the vehicles going through the gate, the main gate at Neverland. Now they'll have, what, about 30 miles or so till they get to the courthouse in Santa Maria?
About 30 miles, and you notice that shot just before they came through the gates. The scale of Neverland is just really hard to describe. It is approximately 3,000 acres, this estate, you know, complete with an amusement park and a zoo and many buildings. You know, this is the vast, unbelievable lifestyle that Michael Jackson is leaving behind, and of course we need, you know, it may well be for the last time.
I see 4 vehicles now. Maybe there are more, but at least in this picture, this aerial shot that we're getting, we see 4 vehicles moving. They don't look like they're going 60 miles an hour, which would give them about a half an hour drive if they're going 30 miles. So this could be delayed. Right now, we're being told about 4:45. That's when the court has set the verdict to be read, 4:45 p.m. Eastern, 1:45 on the West Coast. We'll see if that actually happens. It looks like there are 4 vehicles that's being chased by a motorcycle at the very end of that motorcade. We don't know if that motorcycle is part of the formal motorcade that's taking Michael Jackson and his team to the courthouse, or that could be a paparazzi chasing them as well, having seen how they operate on the motorcycles over the years. That's very possible as well. As we take a look at this motorcade winding its way from Neverland, from the Neverland Ranch over to the courthouse, we have to get a sense of who is going to be joining Michael Jackson once that verdict is read. Jeffrey, you've spent some time inside that courtroom. Give us a little flavor. Besides his lead defense attorney, who else is going to be there?
Well, you know, I don't know who will be there today. There has been sort of a rotating cast of family members. The people there most often are his mother and father. Catherine and Joe Jackson have been there often. 3 of his brothers, Randy, Tito, and Jermaine, have often been in court. So 4 of the 5, Jackson 5, have often been in court. And his sister LaToya and his sister Janet have been in court occasionally. You know, more of them have been present in court for the big moments of the trial. So I suspect some or all of that group will be there today.
Ted Rollins is outside the courthouse in Santa Maria. Ted, I suspect there must be an enormous amount of anticipation and excitement that has developed over this past half hour as we watch these live pictures of Michael Jackson's motorcade making its way from the Neverland Ranch to Santa Maria and the courthouse.
Oh, clearly the fans that are gathered out here, Wolf, are in a sort of a frenzy. They're chanting, and there's a bit of worrisome faces too. You know, this is a big deal for them, of course, and a big deal for Michael Jackson, and you could feel the anticipation and the nervousness, if you will, too, surrounding the outside of this courthouse. Folks have been outside basically holding vigil since the jury got this case a week ago Friday, and they have been out here day and night through deliberations, waiting and chanting and taking turns leading the troops, and now this is it, and you can definitely feel it outside the courthouse. You know what, Michael Jackson has a lot of people that have vocally stood up and supported him. I noticed when we were showing the shots of the motorcade leaving Neverland Ranch, early on in the shot, you saw a string of employees that were all lined up arm in arm as the 4 SUVs drove by near the main house heading towards the gate. One thing is for sure, they're not going to make it here by 1:30. The court has obviously changed the reading to 1:45, and if it takes them longer to get here, they'll change it again. The court has tried to get this verdict read as soon as possible so that it does not allow more people to come here to the courthouse, but clearly they are going to wait for Michael Jackson.
You know that territory quite well, and as we see this motorcade driving, we just lost the picture briefly from these aerial shots that we're getting. Is there any way they can make it there in a half an hour? They literally only have passed 3 minutes. They left the main gate at Neverland. How realistic, how long will it take them, do you suspect, Ted?
It should take them 40 to 45 minutes. That's assuming that they're not stopped for any reason. It is, they're on a sort of an off road right now. It's an off freeway, which, you know, you're lucky to do about 50 miles an hour, especially when you have 4 SUVs trailing each other. Clearly, it's going to take them 40, 45 minutes at best, and it may take them a little bit longer depending on what they encounter once they get close to Santa Maria. Each day, as the motorcade approaches the city, a group of motorcycle cops here in Santa Maria go meet the motorcade and escort them through traffic lights around the courthouse. They say they do it for security, and I think mainly they do it for Santa Maria residents, not necessarily for Michael Jackson, so that they can get him in and out as quickly as possible so he doesn't hold up traffic. So, you know, I think that it'll take 40 to 45 minutes at best, and I think that the court knows that, and they will wait patiently for him to arrive.
Do you know, Ted, if that lead vehicle, that white vehicle we're seeing in these pictures now, is a police car, or is it just an average person who's driving along on this 2-lane highway and just happens to be leading this Michael Jackson motorcade?
I don't know, and clearly it could be either one. If it is law enforcement, it is an unmarked car. It could be a news organization, someone with a camera, or just a fan wanting to get into the middle of it. And it looks like they're leading the group at this point. No way of knowing until we get a ground shot of that vehicle.
It looks like it's they're not moving very quickly either. I suspect if they're saying 4:45 Eastern, 1:45 Pacific, it'll probably go back to 5 o'clock Eastern, 2 o'clock on the West Coast. There you see the whole motorcade stopped as it's about to make a right turn, onto another highway heading towards Santa Maria. The motorcade continuing along this way. The makeup of the jury, Jeffrey Toobin, what, if anything, can we surmise from the makeup of the jury?
Well, it's eight women and 4 men, largely middle class. No African Americans on the jury, which has drawn some notice. But Santa Barbara County has very few African Americans, so it's not all that unusual to have an all African, having no African Americans on the jury. One interesting thing about this jury was that even though there were, I believe, 6 or 8 alternates, throughout this long trial, not one juror left the jury, which certainly in my experience is very unusual. All of these jurors came every day. They obviously had a stake in the outcome, were very serious, were very meticulous about their work. Many of the jurors took extensive notes, filling several notebooks. But as for drawing any conclusion about the verdict from the makeup of the jury, that's more predicting than I'll be able to do.
Ted, do you want to weigh in on the jury? Any thoughts that you've been speaking to a lot of legal analysts out there on the scene, the makeup of this jury and any inclinations they may or may not have?
And one of the things that is very noticeable watching this jury is that they get along. They seem to joke around at the appropriate times. They're serious at the appropriate times. And they all seem to be together when there is some sort of an inside joke that was half told in the jury room and the rest of it in the courtroom. They're all in on it. A lot of times in juries you see factions and you see one individual who's doing his own thing or her thing. Not in this case. It really, they seemed as though they were getting along, and I think that we'll find, if and when they talk about their experience, that was the case. And I'm sure it would have helped the deliberative process a great deal. Obviously, they have come to a verdict. It is not a hung jury. We haven't seen any hints of any problems with this jury. And I think that was evident day in and day out, watching these men and women work together. And some of it was very, very tedious. Some of it very, very emotional. Through it all, they all seem to be one group.
Jeffrey Toobin, in terms of the amount of hours, the amount of days this jury has considered this verdict. What, if anything, goes through your mind? Because early on, when we spoke, we knew it was going to take several days, given how long the actual trial lasted.
Well, you know, I think this is about what you would think of as an average length of deliberation for a case of this duration. You know, this was a complicated case involving lots of different charges, and you know, one thing I think the Jackson camp was hoping was for an instant verdict. Because given the complexity of this case, if they had come back after a day or even 2 days, that would have shown that they simply rejected the government's theory, because there was no way you could work your way through 16 weeks of testimony, 10 different charges in a day or two. Now, having gone on for about 6 days, it is enough time to go through all the evidence. This is sort of a reasonable amount of time, and I think that has got to be cause for concern in the Jackson camp, because there is enough time to have gone through all the evidence and said, there's enough here to convict him.
And Ted Rowlands, as you well remember, since you were inside the courtroom for much of this, including the end of this trial, that videotape of the accuser, the young boy accusing Michael Jackson, that was a powerful way for the prosecution to end its case.
Yes, it was, in that the jury got to hear the accuser and the accusations again. It had been months since the accuser took the stand. And when the prosecution was allowed by this judge to play this first interview that the accuser had with sheriff deputies, it brought it all back. It sort of washed out the conspiracy, which was a very difficult charge to try to prove, and it brought it back to, this is a case about a man who was accused of molesting a boy. That said, Thomas Mesereau, in his close, used that tape as well and encouraged jurors to go and watch the tape and look for inconsistencies in the tape, saying that the tape is exactly what you would expect if a young man was lying. And that is exactly the route that Mesereau took from the very beginning. He pulled no punches. He said, this family and this child is making it up. They're trying to extort Michael Jackson. So jurors could look at the tape both ways once they're in the jury room. That said, in the courtroom, yes, I think it was effective for the prosecution.
Well, I was in the courtroom when Ron Zonen, the prosecutor, played that final videotape. And you know, the thing that hit me is that this was a trial with more than 100 witnesses, you know, for four months long. But the simplicity of that closing was very effective and very powerful, because what he said to the jury was, if you believe this boy, if you believe what this child is saying, or he was a child then, he's not exactly a child now, he's 16, this case is over. All the jury needs to believe is one witness, and that was the witness that they closed with, and it was powerful stuff.
Robert Shapiro is the famed criminal defense attorney who represented O.J. Simpson and knows what is going through the minds of a criminal defense attorney in this particular case. What, about 30 minutes or so, we're estimating, Bob, before the verdict is read. Give us a little flavor of what must be going through the defense team's mind right now.
I'll tell you what's going through my mind right now is a high anxiety, anxious, palpitations, because I followed the case and I'm interested in the case, and I can put myself in the same chair as some of the lawyers. What this is, Wolf, is this is going to the doctor to get the results of a biopsy. This is the Kentucky Derby when you have a photo finish. It's the Super Bowl when there's an instant replay of the winning touchdown. There's just no way to describe it.
Do you have a sense, based on the 7 days, 32 hours, that the jury deliberated, the makeup of the jury, 8 women, 4 men, the length of the trial, what we might anticipate right now, Bob? You know California law, you know California juries. You're one of the best in the business.
You know, not my personal opinion, but what I think the jury will do in this case is render a verdict that will not have Michael Jackson singing "Beat It" today. I think he's going to be convicted.
And on the basis of one specific piece of evidence, or the whole nature, the whole trial?
Well, first, the little boy was the first witness to testify, and as Jeff Toobin has told us, the last witness to testify. he testified without cross-examination, which is unheard of in closing a case, because he was allowed to testify by videotape. And his testimony is uncontroverted. Nobody got up and said, he's lying, it didn't happen that way. The defense, rather, is the mother put pressure on the son to make it up. And I think that's a real tenuous argument to make, Wolf.
Let me let Jeff Toobin weigh in on that point. Jeff?
Well, it's just, I think Bob is right that, the accuser is the whole case. And, it is a difficult position for Michael Jackson to argue that, well, it is true, as he said on videotape in the Martin Bashir documentary, I sleep in the same bed as this boy, and the boy and he were together in that documentary, but there was no sexual relationship between us. Now, of course, the jury has heard both Michael Jackson's admission that they slept in the same bed and the boy testifying that there was, in fact, sexual contact between them. That's a tough charge to defend against, and if Michael Jackson is convicted, that's the reason he's going to be convicted.
But Jeff, and I want to bring Bob back in a second, but when you say that's the case right there, what about all the other evidence that was brought in that the judge allowed to bring in of earlier accusations against Michael Jackson?
Well, that's why this case will be vigorously argued on appeal if Michael Jackson is convicted, is because what Judge Melville did is he allowed the jury to hear about 5 prior allegations of child molestation that Michael Jackson was never criminally charged with, and 3 of those 5 boys who were allegedly the victims testified that it never happened. But the jury had this evidence put in front of it, and even though the courts have so far always upheld this provision of California law, Section 1108 of the Evidence Code, I think that's going to be a possibly successful grounds for appeal here, because this was so much part of the prosecution's case, not the allegation against this boy, but the allegations against Michael Jackson and other boys.
These are live pictures outside the courthouse in Santa Maria, California. They're awaiting the arrival of Michael Jackson and his party. 4 vehicles driving from the Neverland Ranch. We expect in the next 15 to 30 minutes for that motorcade to make its way to the courthouse in Santa Maria. Michael Jackson will walk inside, as he has so many days over the course of this trial, and he will hear the verdict against or in favor of him, and the ramifications of all of that. Robert Shapiro is helping us better understand this process. What about that point that Jeffrey Toobin just made, Bob, that the earlier accusations were admissible, and this could be an element for a possible appeal if he is convicted?
Well, the first point, Jeffrey, is right on the money, and that is that the prior acts have such a compelling weight with jurors. Wolf, gave a lecture to California Judges Association about 6 weeks ago, and there was a poll of judges, and 36 judges had tried cases where prior acts were admitted. Of those 36, 35 resulted in convictions. As far as an appeal, in my mind, the appellate lawyers, which I call the God forbid lawyers, are almost irrelevant in this case. If Michael Jackson is convicted, he's going to be in jail for 6 months to 2 years pending the appeal. And from my perspective, it seems that 1 day in jail for Michael Jackson will be more than he can manage.
Well, on that point, Bob, since he is a physically sick individual and has been in the hospital on several days over the course of this trial alone, would the system allow some sort of hospitalization in lieu of actual jail time in order to accommodate his health?
No, the judge, once he is remanded, the judge has absolutely no authority over the sheriff's department, who will be in charge of his welfare until the date of sentencing. And at the date of sentencing, if he's sentenced to county jail, it will then go back to the sheriff's department. If he's sentenced to prison, which is the most likely outcome if he is convicted, It will be in the hands of what we call the adult authority, which run the prisons themselves. So they will make all determinations after the judge issues his sentence.
All right, stand by, Bob. I want you to stay with us as we await the verdict of Michael Jackson. We may be as quick as 15 minutes away, maybe 30 minutes away. We're waiting for the motorcade bringing Michael Jackson and his entourage to the Santa Maria courthouse. I want to bring Ted Rowlands in. Walk us through the process, how we will learn. When I say we, I mean those of us in the news media and the viewers, the listeners watching right now. Ted, how will we get that information as it unfolds?
Well, the judge has allowed for an audio feed of the reading of the verdict. So the court clerk, Lorna Fry, will read count by count, starting with the conspiracy charge and then moving through the molestation charges, the attempted molestation, and the alcohol charges. And we will hear that real time, assuming that the audio feed works. We have contingency plans in case the audio feed does not work for any reason. We have another way to get the information as soon as we can on the air. But we're hoping and we assume that the audio feed will work and everybody will hear it at the same time as it is happening.
So in other words, the judge will convene the session, and then we will be able to hear just the audio of what happens as the foreman is questioned and the judge gets all of the various verdicts. Is that right?
Right. We're not sure when the audio feed will start, whether it will be when the judge walks into court or when the judge asks the foremen in this case, if they've reached a verdict. And maybe we'll get to listen in as they transfer the verdict over to the court clerk. But we will be able to hear from the moment that the court clerk starts to read count by count the jury's decisions.
Ted, it's Jeff Toobin here. Can I ask you another sort of technical question that I'm curious about? Is there a plan, if Jackson is convicted, of course, then they will move to the question of bail. Will the microphone still be on while they argue bail, or is the plan only to broadcast the announcement of the verdict itself?
We believe that the plan will be for the verdict and only the verdict. And as soon as the verdict has been read, whether we'll be able to hear the judge thank the jury or maybe hear a little bit of the next phase before it's shut off, we'll have to wait and see. But our understanding is that we will hear the verdict read, and that will be it.
Bob Shapiro, Judge Rodney Melville, who's the presiding judge in this case, has been very strict in moving it along and preventing television cameras from being inside, in contrast to the big case that you handled, the O.J. Simpson case. What kind of grades, what do you sense of how this judge has handled this Michael Jackson case?
Well, I think in the last 10 years, Wolf, judges in California and across the United States have learned a big lesson from what happened in the Simpson case. They are much more circumspect. They are trying as much as they can to keep things outside the media, to keep these cases in the courtroom, and to try to not have the jury influenced in any way, shape, or form. It's exceedingly difficult for a judge, a lawyer, or anybody participating in a case that's on camera to say that they don't change their demeanor, they don't change their actions, they don't change the way they speak. It affects everyone. So even though I am in favor of cameras in the courtroom, I'm in favor of cameras that do not editorialize, that just show what the jury is looking at, and that is the witness on the witness stand.
Would the lawyers have been behaved any differently, significantly differently, do you believe, Bob, had there been television cameras allowed inside?
I wouldn't say significantly different, Wolf, because there does come a point when your job comes before anything. But there are always going to be moments where a lawyer may try to send a message, in the event there's a hung jury, may try to do other things that could influence future activities. As far as the questions they're going to ask, no, that wouldn't change at all. But it might change some of the arguments, and it might change some of the positions they say in open court.
Ted Rowlands, how many people have gathered? These are live pictures. We see the attorney, I assume these are live pictures, the attorney going through the metal detectors, Thomas Mesereau, the criminal defense attorney that's been leading the criminal defense. He's already inside. Obviously, he got to the courthouse a lot more quickly, Jeffrey Toobin, than did Michael Jackson, who's still on his way.
And there is Tom Mesereau, as he often did during the trial, waiting to receive the motorcade carrying his client, Michael Jackson. And there was certainly a memorable scene during the day that Michael Jackson was late for court, where all of us saw Mesereau talking urgently into his cell phone, begging Michael Jackson to get to court. That was the day, of course, that he showed up in his blue pajamas. And here, it obviously seems like there is no, he's looking at his watch, but it's not the same kind of crisis in terms of, will the judge be angry? Everybody knows he's on his way, it looks like we're proceeding more or less according to the schedule that the judge set out.
So he's there basically, Jeffrey, to be outside to receive Michael Jackson, to escort him, to walk in with him once he's there.
Absolutely, and it is really a physical connection between defense lawyer and client. At this moment, defense lawyers, you often see, putting their arms around clients. They are, the legal part of their job is done, but it is an emotional and almost physical kind of support that's given now.
Who are the people surrounding him, Ted Rowlands, Thomas Mesereau? Do you know these individuals?
Yes, the woman next to Thomas Mesereau is Susan Yu. She is one of his co-counsels. She did most of the briefing, argued a few things outside the presence of the jury. Behind Mesereau with the glasses underneath the tree is Bob Sanger, and he did a lot of the arguments, most of the technical things. He argued a lot of the motions and handled some of the witnesses, but Thomas Mesereau handled 90% of the important witnesses, if you will, in this case. The other individual is an investigator, a local man that they hired to basically do interviews throughout the trial, and he would come in and out of court every day. You could see the motorcade over on the side of the other screen. They are still on U.S. Highway 101, but they are getting close to Santa Maria. Obviously, they're in cell phone communication with Tom Mesereau and the defense team, and they will be exiting fairly soon here. I can't tell where they are specifically in terms of exits, but they have entered the greater Santa Maria area where you're seeing exit options. Presumably, they are about 5 minutes or less away from entering here. And this is a daily sort of ritual, if you will, where Tom Mesereau either escorts Michael Jackson out after the day or goes and actually meets him as he enters when he gets to the courthouse. A lot more at stake here today. When Michael Jackson leaves these SUVs, there's a chance that he may not be able to get back into his black car and be carried away. He may be in a sheriff's van, depending how things go. That said, if he is found not guilty, one can imagine the type of party atmosphere which will be outside this courthouse. I must say, Wolf, that today or right now, it's not just fans. A lot of people from the Santa Maria community are obviously coming to the courthouse here, people who are not holding the Michael Jackson signs, some people that obviously knew that the verdict is coming, and they have made their way here to the courthouse as well.
Bob Shapiro, I assume you know Tom Mesereau, the famed criminal defense community out in California being a relatively small group. Do you know him?
I know him quite well, Wolf.
Tell us, talk a little bit about him and how he's done representing this high-profile pop star.
I think he's done an outstanding job. He is very, very accomplished. He's very smart. He is an expert cross-examiner, and Michael Jackson got the best defense that was available. The difficult thing for Tom in this case was that last witness on the videotape and the decision whether or not to have Michael Jackson take the witness stand. Even though that's the client's decision, usually the lawyers have dictate really what's going to happen. And in this case, he was really in a very, very difficult position because I know from previous experience where I have been on the other side suing Michael Jackson, and my partner Skip Miller actually tried a case in the same courthouse against Michael Jackson, that he is a very, very poor witness. And it would seem that if he did take the witness stand, that might just be the end of him on his own testimony. However, there's a big risk in not taking the witness stand. First, Mesereau told the jury they would hear from Michael Jackson. And in a case like this, we're all accustomed now to the television term, he said, or he said, she said. And in this case, it's only he said.
And when he said at the opening statement, Thomas Mesereau, Bob, that the jury would hear from Michael Jackson, the implication was they would hear from him on the stand, but they did hear from him in that video, that documentary that they released, which I suppose he could have been referring to in his opening statement. Is that fair?
I think that would be a nice way to put spin on it, Wolf. But I think when he made his opening statement, he made a commitment to the jury that they would hear Michael Jackson from the witness stand in that courtroom.
What do you think, Jeffrey?
You know, I agree with Bob that was a rare misstep by Tom Mesereau during this trial. I too thought Mesereau really did an excellent job. You know, his cross-examinations of the accuser, of the accuser's mother, were really superb. But you know, there really was no reason to promise that Michael Jackson was going to testify, and the defense, the prosecution, in their summation, made much of Mesereau's failure to deliver some of his promises made in opening statements. But I think Mesereau made the only possible choice he could in keeping Michael Jackson off the witness stand. I just thought he would have been a terrible witness. As Bob points out, he has been a terrible witness in previous civil cases. But also, I mean, this is a guy who has said on camera that he thinks it's appropriate for 40-year-old men to sleep in the same bed with 12-year-old boys. Imagine trying to explain a comment like that to a jury, which is what he would have to do if he took the witness stand. It is simply inexplicable to most people that someone could think that's normal behavior, and for him to have to explain it at length, which he would have had to do, would have sunk his case right there.
There has been some suggestion, Bob Shapiro, that the guidelines, the instructions that the judge gave the jury, nearly 100 pages, were so technical, were so complicated that it almost made the life of the jury impossible. I don't know if you saw a piece, there was a long piece in the New York Times on this just over this past weekend. And in the end, the jury might have to simply neglect to go into to understand fully all those instructions that the judge gave them. What do you make of that argument?
I think it's correct. The jury instructions in California are legal fictions. For example, the jury is instructed not to consider the fact that the defendant did not take the witness stand in the case. Jurors subconsciously are going to consider it, and in this case, as Jeff correctly pointed out, since it was mentioned in the opening statement, the prosecutors were allowed to tell the jury, well, you were told you were going to hear from Mr. Jackson, and you didn't. So that is going to be a very difficult instruction for the jury to adhere to.
There's another. I'm sorry, go ahead, Bob.
Jeff, I'm sorry. The second thing that I thought that is going to be very difficult for the jury is on the prior acts. The standard that the jury will consider is more likely than not a civil standard, whereas in the case in chief, it's a criminal standard. And it's very, very difficult to separate those two types of instructions. And the final thing is that I don't know anyone who can really articulate the definition of reasonable doubt.
The argument that some have made, Jeffrey, is that those instructions that the judge gave were more to cover his own record, if you will, if there is an appeal. And it was written in sort of legal jargon as opposed to something that the average layperson sitting on that jury could really understand.
Well, I mean, I think as Bob points out, that's more of a systemic failure in California and in the whole country. I mean, the whole subject of legal instructions is a very vexing one because they are not written in ways that normal people exchange thoughts and just talk. I mean, just to emphasize one thing Bob said, you know, the evidence about the 5 other allegations against him part of the jury instructions is don't take that evidence as proof that he did it, but take it as showing whether he had a propensity to do it or not. Those are not normal ways of thinking. I mean, you either allow the evidence and let jurors to draw whatever conclusions they want, or you don't allow the evidence. But the instructions are merely confusing. And I think, you know, one of the values of these high-profile cases is they bring out problems in all cases. And one of the problems that jurors often speak about is that jury instructions are simply very hard to understand. And this case certainly showed why that's true.
We see the motorcade now from this aerial shot stuck in a little traffic as it gets closer and closer to Santa Maria and the courthouse in California. We are presumably only moments away from the motorcade getting there. Michael Jackson walking out, being received by Thomas Mesereau, his attorney, and the other criminal defense attorneys representing Michael Jackson. They'll walk into the courthouse, go through the metal detectors as they have during the 14 weeks of the trial, the testimony, the arguments. Our man on the scene from day one has been Ted Rowlands. He's, of course, there right now. Give us a little flavor. Are people showing up by the carloads, Ted?
Oh, yeah, the crowd has gotten much larger over the past hour, as the judge in this case feared would happen. They wanted to get this verdict read as soon as possible. The motorcade right now is only about a block away. They're going to be making a left-hand turn here and then entering the courthouse area. So we're about a minute away, or less. They're going to turn here and then take a right into the courthouse. And they have 4 SUVs. Presumably a good portion of the Jackson family will be with Michael Jackson as he steps out and walks in to hear his fate. They're now just outside the courthouse, and the first van should be making its way in. You can see the Santa Maria police escort, which has been the case, not just today, but throughout the trial, bringing the Jackson motorcade to and from the courthouse.
We see those SUVs making the way, winding up. They're about to stop, and we see Michael Jackson fans. Are there also Michael Jackson opponents who gather out there as well, or just his fans, Ted?
On any given day, there are some vocal Michael Jackson opponents, but they are outnumbered 99% to 1%. As you see the first SUV pull up here and step out the bodyguards, and here comes Michael Jackson now in one of these cars.
You know what we're going to do, Ted? We're going to just listen a little bit, see if our microphones can pick up any of the sound, any of the exchanges. I don't know if that's possible, but we do see that ubiquitous umbrella going up to help protect Michael Jackson from the sun or presumably other aspects as he walks in. Let's just listen briefly if we could get some of the sound from what may be going on. And there he is, Michael Jackson, being escorted inside, surrounded by his father and other family members. His bodyguards are there as well. Michael Jackson walking in, Thomas Mesereau with the white hair, his criminal defense attorney, his lead attorney, as they go inside. Let's listen a little bit longer.
Stay in the middle. The guy's holding the umbrella over him because he's got very sensitive skin.
Ted Rowlands, we've seen this happen on so many different occasions during the course of these 14 weeks of this trial. It's a lot different, though, today.
Oh, yeah, and you know, it may not seem that way. The pictures, they seem the same, but I can tell you at the courthouse, it is night and day. The emotion, just watching him get out. There's Jermaine Jackson with his hand on the metal detector there next to Thomas Mesereau shooting through. You can see Janet Jackson and LaToya Jackson going through there as well in front of attorney Bob Sanger. The emotion, just the emotion of seeing him pop out and embrace Susan Yu, his mother, who's been here every day and heard some very graphic testimony. you could tell that there is a lot of emotion here, a lot at stake here. A lot of people didn't think Michael Jackson would show up. People thought that maybe he would flee the country, but here he is. He's here to find out which way this jury is going to decide whether or not he is guilty or innocent. There's Janet Jackson walking through the metal detector. There are a certain amount of seats inside the courtroom. Obviously, they've decided who will get which seats, and they are making their way in slowly but surely.
Bob Shapiro, give us a little flavor of what's going through your mind as you watch all of this. And just to remind our viewers, we're only minutes away from the verdict in the Michael Jackson trial.
Unbelievable anxiety and anticipation at this point in time. When you walk into the courtroom, they'll be looking at all the jurors coming out, seeing if anybody looks towards Michael Jackson, if there's any hint of a smile. They will also be sitting there, and something in California that happens, and in most states, is that the judge will ask the foreman if they've reached a verdict. We know they have reached a verdict. The judge will then ask those verdict forms to be turned over to the bailiff, and the bailiff will give them to the judge. The judge will then review those verdict forms, but will not announce the verdict. Again, people will be looking at the judge for his reactions. Then he will hand it to the court clerk, who will then read the verdict as Michael Jackson stands up. After the reading of the verdict, the lawyers will be asked whether or not they want the jury polled as to whether or not this was their verdict. Generally, if there's a conviction, the defense will ask for a polling. And then comes the moment of truth, when the judge makes a decision whether or not to remand Michael Jackson or let him go pending sentencing if, in fact, he is convicted.
And Jeffrey, if in fact he's convicted on some of the so-called lesser charges, he might let him go out on bail.
Absolutely. If he's convicted only of the misdemeanors, for example, I think it is virtually certain that he will be allowed to remain out on bail. You know, one of the folklores of trials is that if the jury comes in and doesn't look at the defendant, that means they are convicting him. If they look at him, that means they are acquitting him. That's actually proven pretty reliable in my experience, and those in the courtroom will let us know whether that plays true to form.
Can the jurors, Jeffrey, and I'll let Bob weigh in on this as well, if they walk in and let's say they're sympathetic to Michael Jackson, sort of give him a wink and a nod and sort of a smile and say, you know, relax?
Sure, they absolutely can, and it does happen. And even the issue of polling the jury is important. That's not merely a formality, because if in the course of polling a jury, usually the way it works is the judge says, "Is that your verdict?" And each juror says yes. But if a juror says, "No, I disagree," the judge will send them back in to continue their deliberations. So the polling of the jury usually turns out to be a formality, but it has deep legal significance, and it has happened that it's led to different verdicts.
Bob Shapiro, did you get any hint whatsoever before the verdict in the O.J. Simpson trial from the jurors after they walked in, before the jury verdict was read, what they might decide?
Absolutely not. They came in poker-faced. They knew that every action that they took was going to be reported worldwide. And I think this jury will do the exact same thing. I think they will walk in, they will look straight ahead, they will show no emotion whatsoever, and will act in a real professional way.
And if they do, that would be very much consistent with how they've behaved during this trial. This is a jury that's known that it's been under scrutiny. This jury knows that reporters are sitting there every day. So I think they've gone out of their way, even during very graphic and emotional testimony, not to betray their feelings. And as a result, those of us who watch them have very little idea which way they're leaning.
That's obviously clear right now. We have no idea what the verdict is going to be, and given the nature of the history of California juries, I think it would be ridiculous to even try to predict what that verdict is going to be. Ted Rowlands, we see all the family members of the Michael Jackson family walking in, the parents, the brothers, the sisters. It would seem to be, at least on the surface, a close-knit, loving family, although we know from all the articles that we've read and all the stories that we've heard, there has been some dysfunctional elements of this family going back many years.
Yeah, but the face that they've put on successfully is that they are one. They have come together to court more times than not. LaToya Jackson went in, one of the first people to go in, and I noticed she was wanded. And that is different. The security today is incredibly high. Each member of the Jackson family, including Michael, was hand-wanded, not just the metal detector. Obviously, a lot of tension, and security is a key aspect of all of this. And right now, there's a very calm sense of quiet outside the courthouse where I could barely hear myself a few minutes ago. Now I can hear a pin drop for a block away. There is nobody talking. Everybody is waiting for this audio feed to kick in. And when that happens, we don't know. The jury obviously has to come in. That'll take a little bit of time, but any minute now, we expect that we'll start to hear that audio feed from inside the courtroom, and from there, we'll be able to see through the audio the picture of what's inside that courtroom. I can only imagine the tension level in there right now.
Ted, are there loudspeakers out there? How are all those hundreds of people going to find out the verdict? Will they just have to be through radios and just the buzz, or will they hear directly themselves?
They will be able to hear some off-air signals from the media, and I think that is why they're literally pressed up against this fence here, which you know very well, Jeffrey, lines the outside of the courthouse. They are all pressed up against it. Whether or not somebody has an amplifier, local TV is covering it, local radio, so I'm sure there are some transistor radios out there or other radios that they'll be able to hear from, so they will hear it. And right now there's a very eerie sense of calm and quiet outside this courthouse. It's hard to articulate, but literally they can hear my voice right now. It is so quiet, people waiting to hear this feed.
Ted, will they give us a sort of a 2-minute warning when the audio feed will begin, or we just have to wait and hope that the system works?
We have to wait and hope it works. In fact, we have Plan B in the works right here. If this audio system doesn't kick in, I'll be getting the verdicts read from a producer here. Peter Ornstein has 2 walkie-talkies up to his ears right now, and that is how we'll get the information out as soon as possible. They're winging it to some extent, as you might imagine. There's a lot of logistics to deal with, so we are just waiting patiently until we, I think, hear this feed. We won't know until it has started.
Is there an accurate number, Ted? How many journalists have gathered in Santa Maria for this Michael Jackson trial? We know not only from the United States and Canada, but from literally around the world, reporters have come to California to cover this trial.
Well, 32 countries are represented. More than 2,000 journalists were credentialed to cover this event. In terms of size, right now, we see the most we've seen in terms of journalists here, and they are literally from all around the world, and they have been here since this jury got it. They've been here sporadically throughout the trial, but the media is here in force, and the world right now is watching and hopefully listening to this verdict that we expect in any minute.
This is a real difference.
Clerk is now in the court. We understand the clerk is in the court, and 2 minutes, we've been told, till the jury comes in. 2 minutes until the jury comes in, and presumably 2 minutes until this audio feed begins from inside the courtroom.
We'll be listening and we'll be watching. Certainly the anticipation building right now. It doesn't get much more exciting. If you've been watching this case, it's going to boil down in the next 2, 3, 4, 5 minutes. What happens, and Jeffrey Toobin, as we await this verdict right now, give us a thought.
Well, just I covered the O.J. Simpson case, and one of the things that I notice is different between the two is, there was greater interest in the United States in the Simpson case, but there really wasn't much international interest in the Simpson case. And what's been so striking about covering Michael Jackson is the degree of worldwide interest. I mean, the CNN camera position there, there have been German television, Japanese television, Mexican television in the next booth over. And, in many respects, Michael Jackson is a greater star overseas than he is in his rather fading way within the United States. So it is no exaggeration to say, the whole world is watching at this point.
We're told the jury is coming in, Ted Rowlands. The members of the jury, 8 women and 4 men. They've been sitting over these past 14 weeks. Within a minute or so, they should be walking in, and shortly thereafter, we presumably will hear the voice of Judge Rodney Melville. Give us some of the preparations for the actual reading of the verdicts, 10 specific counts against Michael Jackson, some more serious, clearly, than others, but all of them very serious to begin with. Ted, walk us through this process that's about to happen for viewers who are just tuning in right now at the top of the hour. It's 5 p.m. on the East Coast, 2 p.m. on the West Coast.
Well, the judge will walk into the courtroom, all will rise as is typical, and once court is in session, presumably the judge will say, have you reached a verdict? And the answer from the foreperson, number 2, a Hispanic male, will say, yes, we have, Your Honor. At that moment, the verdict forms will be handed over via bailiff to Lorna Fry, and this is the clerk who sits on the left side of the judge. The jury's on the right, and then she will begin with count 1, the conspiracy count, then go through the alleged molestation counts, the lewd acts on a child, the attempted lewd acts, and then the final 4 will be the alcohol counts. Count 2 will be the molestation as alleged by the victim. Whether he's guilty or not guilty on the conspiracy, that will be the big one if he is found guilty on count 2. That will be presumably coming within the next minute. The jury is filing in as we speak, and we are waiting and listening to see if this audio feed kicks in. And if not, we do have someone in a listening room who is hearing it real time and will tell us via the radio what the verdicts are as they come in.
And just to review, Jeffrey Toobin, count 1 is conspiracy to commit child abduction, false imprisonment, and extortion. Once that verdict is reached on, as announced on count 1, I presume we will get a pretty good sense which direction this jury is heading.
The big one to listen for is count 2. Count 2 is probably the strongest molestation count, and if he's convicted of that, you know, that changes Michael Jackson's life forever, and that is the count that will keep him in prison for quite a few years.
So we'll be listening to 1 and 2, all of these 10 verdicts, and they will go through, Ted, one by one, all of the verdicts, and then they will poll the jurors after that. Is that how it works?
The attorneys will be given the option, do you want the jurors polled individually? Most likely, whoever loses will say, yes, they do want that to take place. And the jurors will, one by one, get up and say, yes, indeed, that is how I voted in this process. On the last 4 alcohol charges, they also have a lesser to consider. They could find him not guilty of providing alcohol to molest, but guilty of providing alcohol, which is a misdemeanor charge, meaning Jackson would most likely still be out on bail. Okay. Jury is coming in, I'm being told. The jury is now coming in. The judge wanted the alternates to be here as well, 4 men and 4 women that sat through the trial. The alternates are coming in with the 12 panelists, and presumably now within the minute, we should start to hear this audio feed from inside the courtroom.
Jeffrey, these 8 women and 4 men, the jury and the alternates, there was 1 black alternate, but no blacks on the jury. Did anyone make a big issue out of the fact that there were no blacks on the jury?
Well, Jesse Jackson, who's been a sometime spokesman for Michael Jackson, has raised that issue. Interestingly, you know, if 1 juror had left, the African-American alternate, I believe, was alternate number 1, so he would have joined the jury, but no jurors left, so it is a jury without any African-Americans. In this area, that is not all that unusual. This is less than 2% African-American, this part of Santa Barbara County. This is a city of 70,000 people. Very few African-Americans live there. Many Hispanics live there, but not many African-Americans. So it is not all that out of the ordinary to have a jury without African-Americans.
Is there a heavy police presence, more robust, shall we say, Ted, today than has been the case over these many weeks of this trial?
Wolf, I've just been told the jury is seated, and they are now awaiting for Judge Rodney Melville to enter the courtroom. And at that moment, we should be able to hear this audio feed coming through. The jury, again, is seated, now waiting for the judge to walk into the courtroom to start the proceedings.
All right, we will await, and hopefully that audio signal will work. We'll be able to hear the voice from Judge Rodney Melville give the last bit of instruction as the jury verdict is read to us, to the entire world, all those people who are watching and listening right now. I was asking if the police presence today, Ted, is a lot heavier than it is on a normal day of this trial.
Judge is on the bench. Wolf, the judge is on the bench.
All right.
The judge is on the bench. And we are now waiting for this feed. If it doesn't come through, we have somebody who's monitoring this, and they're telling us via radio the judge is on the bench, and the feed should be coming at any minute. I just heard something in my ear click. I'm assuming that that may be the beginning of this audio feed.
Well, we're letting our viewers know exactly what we know, and hopefully they will get the audio feed exactly as we get it. And we're not getting it yet, so maybe the court has not yet flipped that switch so that we can hear the voice of the judge. Ted, tell us what your producers on the scene are telling you.
I got it. Oh. They are telling us that the judge is on the bench. He's got a radio, and the verdict has now been handed to the judge. The judge will look over the verdict forms and make sure that everything is in order, and then the judge will hand the verdict forms to his left so that they can be read by the court clerk, Lorna Fry, who sits directly to the judge's left. As you're looking, facing him from the courtroom. We have been told that the judge has the verdicts in hand and is looking them over right now, but obviously we are not hearing the audio feed coming from inside the courtroom. However, we will get the verdicts as they are read via two-way radio, and I will pass along the verdicts one by one with each count as we get them over the radio.
All right, we're going to stand by, and hopefully within the next few seconds we'll begin to hear the voice of the clerk and or the judge as the verdicts in the Michael Jackson trial are read inside this courthouse in Santa Maria, California. These are crowds that have gathered outside the courthouse getting ready. They're anxious to hear as well whether or not Michael Jackson will be convicted or acquitted in this child molestation trial. It's been 14 weeks in the making. The jury has met for 7 days, 32 hours if you're counting, of actual deliberation before reaching the verdict. About 95 or so minutes ago, when we received word from the court that the jury has reached a verdict and would be announced within 60 minutes, but it's actually taken a little bit more than an hour and a half. Given the long ride from Neverland to the courthouse, it took a little bit longer than presumably the judge had wanted, but all is well that ends well in this particular regard, not necessarily, Jeffrey Toobin, a big deal that it's 30 minutes later than the judge may have wanted.
This has actually worked fairly smoothly in terms of getting them there, but so far the audio system at least either hasn't been turned on or it's not working.
Any new word you're getting yet on what's going on, Ted?
No, Wolf, I'm looking at Peter Ornstein, our producer. He has both radios pressed up against his ear, waiting for an update. There are 10 separate counts, so there are a lot of forms that the judge will have to look through before he hands them over to the clerk. Presumably, the judge is still checking those out. Again, I just heard an attempt, it sounded like, for the audio feed to kick in. However, nothing at this point. We're still waiting. What's that? Judge is still reading the verdicts, I'm being told. The judge is still reading over the verdict forms. And the courtroom, I'm being told, is absolutely silent, which pretty much mirrors what's happening outside the courthouse. It is absolutely silent out here as everybody waits for word to see which way this jury has decided in terms of Michael Jackson's fate. The judge will, when he's finished looking at these verdicts, hand them to the clerk, and at that point we'll either get the feed or we will pass it along to you via the radio, real time. We have somebody who has a visual and has audio from a feed room, which is around the backside of the courthouse, and that individual will pass it along to us over the radio, if need be.
How extraordinary, Jeffrey, is the way this Judge Rodney Melville, has orchestrated the release of the information and the verdict. How unusual is this, what we're seeing? Obviously, this is a high-profile celebrity case, but still.
I've never seen a judge allow a partial audio broadcast. I mean, this is without precedent. It was designed to avoid the confusion that we had in the Martha Stewart case, where there was no audio feed, and people came running out of the courtroom with signals that some were right, some were wrong. The idea is give everyone the information at the same time, avoid that confusion, and we'll see if it works.
Bob Shapiro, if you're still awaiting, still can hear us, Bob Shapiro, the criminal defense attorney who represented O.J. Simpson in his trial 10 years ago, how extraordinary is this procedure that Judge Melville has worked out?
It's totally unique, and as Jeff pointed out, in these high-profile cases, one thing you always hear, and that is from the prosecutors, that the cases aren't going to be tried any differently, and the judges would like you to have that same impression. Nothing could be further from the truth. These cases have their own unique attributes. Everybody views them differently, and I think the judge has made a good decision here in releasing the verdicts. I actually would have preferred to have those verdicts read with a camera in the courtroom on the clerk.
We can assume, Bob Shapiro, correct me if I'm wrong, there's no hung jury. They've reached a verdict on all 10 counts.
It's not we can assume, we know. They have announced that they have reached a verdict. They buzz the judge, and they have one buzz if they have a verdict, two buzzes if they have a question. So clearly, if the reports have been accurate, there was one buzz and a verdict will be read on each and every count.
One thing that was very unusual about this jury deliberation is that the questions that the jury had, and there were some questions, and the readbacks that took place were not released to the public. And I think, frankly, that's a very disturbing development for those of us who believe in public trials. And this is the first trial I have ever heard of where jury questions were not released to the public.
Would they be released after the verdicts are announced?
Perhaps, presumably, but since they've never not been released before, I don't know what procedure the judge plans to use. But, I mean, again, I think it's an example of how these high-profile trials develop their own codes, their own laws, and judges have been moving more and more towards restricting
You've
them.
tried a lot of cases in California. How extraordinary is this, the fact that we were not told what the questions were, Bob Shapiro?
Yeah, it's not, I don't find it that extraordinary at all. Generally, what happens is when the jury has a question, the judge calls both lawyers in, and they read the question. And it may be, can you give us a better definition? Usually the response is, follow the instructions that you've already been given. It's a time for people to try to be fair, but it is also a give and take session. And so those kinds of things generally are off the record. I don't see any problem with it. If there is a readback, they could announce what was read back, and I agree with Jeff on that issue.
And Bob Shapiro, we're told by Ted Rowlands and our producers on the ground who are inside that courtroom listening to what's going on as we await the audio from the court clerk and from the judge on the verdict, 10 counts involving this child molestation trial against Michael Jackson. As the judge is now going through the paperwork, reading the verdicts, studying them, does he have any discretion if, let's say he has a question and he's confused, could he tell the jury, you know what, I want to take a break and let's review something, or must he go forward now, Bob Shapiro, and have the verdicts announced?
Well, that's a very, very good question. If there are inaccuracies, or if there are clear mistakes in the verdict form, or if there are special allegations that the jurors have to render a decision on and they haven't filled out the verdict forms properly, he will instruct the jury to go back and do them properly. However, he cannot change anything that this jury has done at this point in time. If there is a conviction, he could do it later.
Another unusual aspect of this deliberation is that the judge has not released the exact verdict form that the jury is filling out. Again, that's usually the case in high-profile trials where there's interest in a verdict form. For reasons that are, frankly, inexplicable to me, this judge has not released the precise form that the jury will be checking the boxes in, so we don't know precisely how the verdict will be announced.
Bob Shapiro, here we go. Here's the audio. Let's listen.
Superior Court of the State of California for the County of Santa Barbara, Santa Maria Division, the people of the State of California plaintiff versus Michael Joe Jackson defendant, case number 1133603, count 1, verdict. We, the jury, in the above entitled case, find the defendant not guilty of conspiracy as charged in count 1 of the indictment, dated June 13th, 2005, foreperson number 80. Count 2, verdict. We, the jury, in the above entitled case, find the defendant not guilty of a lewd act upon a minor child as charged in count 2 of the indictment, dated June 13th, 2005, foreperson number 80. Count 3, verdict. We, the jury, in the above entitled case, find the defendant not guilty of a lewd act upon a minor child as charged in count 3 of the indictment, dated June 13th, 2005, foreperson number 80. Count 4, verdict. We, the jury, in the above entitled case, find the defendant not guilty of lewd act upon a minor child as charged in count 4 of the indictment, dated June 10th, 2005, foreperson number 80. Count 5, verdict. We, the jury, in the above entitled case, find the defendant not guilty of a lewd act upon a minor child as charged in count 5 of the indictment, dated June 10th, 2005, foreperson number 80. Count 6, verdict. We, the jury, in the above entitled case, find the defendant not guilty of attempting to commit a lewd act upon a minor child as charged in count 6 of the indictment, dated June 13th, 2005, foreperson number 80. Count 7, verdict. We, the jury, in the above entitled case, find the defendant not guilty of administering an intoxicating agent to assist in the commission of a felony as charged in count 7 of the indictment, dated June 13th, 2005, foreperson number 80. Count 7, verdict, lesser offense. We, the jury, in the above entitled case, find the defendant not guilty of providing alcoholic beverages to persons under the age of 21, a lesser included offense of that charge in count 7 of the indictment, dated June 13th, 2005, foreperson number 80. Count 8, verdict. We, the jury, in the above entitled case, find the defendant not guilty of administering an intoxicating agent to assist in the commission of a felony as charged in count 8 of the indictment, dated June 13th, 2005, foreperson number 80. Count 8, verdict, lesser offense. We, the jury, in the above entitled case, find the defendant not guilty of providing alcoholic beverages to persons under the age of 21, a lesser included offense that charged in count 8 of the indictment, dated June 13th, 2005, foreperson number 80. Count 9, verdict. We, the jury, in the above entitled case, find the defendant not guilty of administering an intoxicating agent to assist in the commission of a felony as charged in count 9 of the indictment, dated June 10th, 2005, foreperson number 80. Count 9, verdict, lesser offense. We, the jury, in the above entitled case, find the defendant not guilty of providing alcoholic beverages to persons under the age of 21, a lesser included offense of that charge in count 9 of the indictment, dated June 10th, 2005, foreperson number 80. Count 10, verdict. We, the jury, in the above entitled case, find the defendant not guilty of administering an intoxicating agent to assist in the commission of a felony as charged in count 10 of the indictment, dated June 10th, 2005, foreperson number 80. Count 10, verdict, lesser offense. We, the jury, in the above entitled case, find the defendant not guilty of providing alcoholic beverages to persons under the age of 21, a lesser included offense of that charge in count 10 of the indictment, dated June 10th, 2005, foreperson number 80.
That completes the reading of the verdicts, and now we're going to go off the air.
And there it is, all 10 counts, not guilty on all 10 counts. Michael Jackson will be walking out of this courtroom a free man, not guilty on the more serious charges, the lesser charges, administering alcohol, a misdemeanor, a slam dunk against the prosecution. Jeffrey Toobin, I think it's fair to say a lot of people are going to be very, very surprised.
A lot of people are going to be surprised, and you don't need a law degree to understand this verdict. It is an absolute and complete victory for Michael Jackson, utter humiliation and defeat for Thomas Snedden, the district attorney, who has been pursuing Michael Jackson for more than a decade, who brought a case that was not it was not one that this jury bought at all. And this one's over.
We said before the verdict that California juries are unpredictable, Bob Shapiro. In this particular case, a lot of people thought Michael Jackson would be convicted at least on the misdemeanors. A lot of people thought he'd be convicted on the more serious felony counts, the sexual assault, if you will. Give us your immediate reaction.
Well, first, the jury did not come up with a compromise verdict, which a lot of people would suspect if they just wanted to give the prosecution something. The jury clearly has told the prosecution this was a case you probably should not have brought. The little boy's credibility was probably non-existent to this jury, coupled with the mother who offered testimony that bordered on the bizarre, that this is a case that they didn't want to show guilt by association. They did follow the judge's instructions clearly on the prior bad acts by not using that as a way to show he committed this particular crime. And my hope is that the public accepts this verdict. This is a jury in a very, very conservative part of California, a jury that by all markings look like a pro-prosecution jury. And if this jury had no doubt, none of us should have any doubt whatsoever.
You personally, though, are pretty surprised, Bob Shapiro. You thought this was perhaps going to go the other way.
I certainly did. And I didn't think Michael would be singing Beat It. Now he's going to be doing the moonwalk.
He's not only going to be doing the moonwalk, he's going to be coming out. He might jump on top. All of a sudden, his health, I suspect, Jeffrey Toobin, is going to get a lot better very, very quickly. Ted Rowlands, let's bring you in. You've been covering this trial from day one. We see a lot of people cheering, a lot of happy Jackson fans out there. Set the scene for us.
Well, when the first verdict was read, they cheered, then immediately they quieted down to hear the next, and it went through all 10. Clearly now, it's pandemonium out here among the crowd members. They are jubilant. Inside the courtroom, we understand from our producer, Michael Jackson dabbed his eyes with Kleenex during the reading of the verdict, and now you can see the SUVs are pulling up, and Michael Jackson will be getting inside one of those vehicles and heading to wherever he wants. He is not guilty and has to answer to nobody. He has been found unanimously not guilty by this jury, and this crowd that has gathered outside could not be more pleased. 90% of them Jackson supporters.
Are there arrangements? Is there a microphone set up outside the courthouse there where you are, Ted Rowlands, for if Michael Jackson wants to make a statement to his fans, if his attorneys want to speak, if the prosecution wants to speak, or if the jury wants to speak? We're standing by for all of that if it happens. What's the arrangement that's been worked out?
We have been given permission from the court to set up interview rooms inside the courthouse for defense lawyers, prosecutors, Michael Jackson, and jury members. It will be up to those individuals whether or not they want to make a statement. We were told that Michael Jackson would be at least reading a statement. We have to wait to see whether or not that comes to fruition. The vans are out here. He could leave at any minute. We will not be able to stick a microphone out to get any audio from Jackson, impromptu audio, as he's leaving, because sheriff deputies have lined the space between the media and the vans. We will not most definitely be able to get to Michael Jackson. Security is extremely high here, but we do expect a statement from Michael Jackson in this prearranged scenario. Whether or not he's up to it or wants to do it at this time, we'll have to wait here and see, but everything is in place for all of the parties to make statements now here in the next few minutes.
What are you hearing from our producers inside? Ted Rowlands, what's happening right now? And just to recap, for viewers who may just be tuning in, not guilty, all 10 counts against Michael Jackson, a clear and decisive unanimous win for Michael Jackson against these charges. What's happening inside the courtroom right now?
What we've been told as far as inside the courtroom is only that Michael Jackson dabbed his eyes. We have not gotten another update since then. The judge is now addressing the jurors, thanking them for their service. He has not adjourned court yet, so all of the parties are still inside court, listening to Judge Rodney Melville basically button up this case, thank jurors for their service, and then allow everybody to go their separate ways. So right now, the judge still holding court, saying goodbye to all of the parties inside the courtroom.
All right, Ted, I'm going to ask you to get some more information, what's happening inside. Let me bring Jeffrey Toobin, our senior legal analyst, back into this. This is clearly everything that Michael Jackson, Thomas Mesereau's attorney, all of the family members, the fans, wanted plus.
Absolutely. And you know, I think a lot of people watching this verdict, especially people who didn't follow the trial very closely, will be tempted to say, look, another crazy California jury acquitting an obviously guilty person. Many people regard that as happening in O.J. Simpson, Robert Blake last year. Whatever you think of those other verdicts, this was a very different case. This was a questionable case. This was a difficult case for the prosecution. I think one issue that the prosecution will really have difficulty answering is why did they bring that count one? Because the count one was a very weak count in and of itself, but it also allowed the defense to put forth the conspiracy theory that the jury obviously believed, that this case was orchestrated by the accuser's mother, that the mother put the son up to lying about what happened. If these prosecutors had not charged that conspiracy, the mother wouldn't even have been a witness in this case, and it would have just been the accuser testifying, and I think the prosecutors would have had a lot better chance of winning.
What happens now, Bob Shapiro? Does Michael Jackson and his attorneys, can they take legal action against the accuser, the accuser's mother, the accuser's supporters right now for if they decide they want to keep this issue going?
No, they are finished. They are not going to bring any further action whatsoever. They want this thing to go away, to fade away, and not be heard from again. I wanted to just touch on one thing that Jeffrey so accurately pointed out, and that is by bringing up count one as the most serious charge being the first count. And
let me just repeat what that count was. Conspiracy to commit child abduction, false imprisonment, and extortion, as we see people leaving the courtroom where the judge has now dismissed the jury. Go ahead, Bob.
The jury clearly would find that that was overreaching. This case never was about extortion. This case was about one issue and one issue only, and that is, was this little boy molested or not molested by Michael Jackson? The jury has spoken loud and clear. And it goes back to one thing that I have said in these cases over and over again, that defense lawyers don't win these cases, prosecutors lose them.
And when you say prosecutors lose them, give us a specific, what did the prosecutor do wrong in this particular case? Here he is, Michael Jackson. Here he is, Michael Jackson is walking out of the courtroom right now. We see him. There's a little bit of a smile there. I suppose he's as stunned as a lot of other people are, surrounded by his father and his sister and other family members walking out. No visible emotion there, Jeffrey. Did you see some visible emotion on his face?
Not at that moment. He did look stunned and exhausted, and much like he has throughout the trial, just drained and physically ill, frankly.
And we see his attorney, criminal defense attorney, the white-haired man, Thomas Mesereau, walking out. There's the family. Let's listen in to see if we can hear anything.
Mr. Mesereau.
He's inside his SUV now, his supporters, his family members hugging each other. Michael Jackson blew a kiss or two to his fans. He could hear the cheering as he was walking out. Thomas Mesereau, his attorney, staying behind together with his legal team. Michael Jackson, not guilty, all 10 counts that were brought against him. He clearly didn't make a statement on this particular occasion. Perhaps he'll be making a statement once he returns to his Neverland Ranch, another 45-minute or so drive from here. We'll be standing by to hear if Thomas Mesereau, his attorney, will be making a statement, and if the prosecution will be making a statement. Ted Rowlands, you're there. Give us a little bit more.
Well, Wolf, Rusty Dornan, my colleague, was inside the courtroom when these verdicts were read outside. The vans are now leaving. The fans chasing the caravan down the street. Take us through what happened, Rusty.
Absolutely incredible, as it always is, as you know, in those courtrooms. You could not hear a sound in the courtroom as the judge was ripping open each of the verdict messages, because he had to look at them first before he had the clerk read them. And the only sound in the courtroom you could hear was the tearing of these envelopes. Meantime, I was sitting just behind the family, behind Catherine and Joe Jackson and Tito, and then in front of them, LaToya, his sister, and Randy, his brother. Now, just as the clerk is about to read the verdicts, all the kids reached around. Tito had his arm around his mother. LaToya reached her hand around. They all were touching Catherine Jackson, Michael's mother. She started to break. As soon as they heard the first not guilty, she broke down and started to cry. They all kept sort of grabbing her and holding her. And from that point on, really, there was no other sound in the courtroom other than that clerk reading those not guilty verdicts. Now, Michael Jackson, you could not see his expression. He appeared very somber, but at the end, he did turn. He hugged his attorney, Robert Sanger, then, of course, also hugged Thomas Mesereau, but it still appeared very somber. As you can see, when he was leaving, he was blowing kisses to the fans and that sort of thing. But absolutely incredible moment in the courtroom, and, of course, for his family, you know, and for him, for what they've been going through for the past few months.
Walking out, the family did not, by any stretch of the imagination, raise their hands up. There wasn't a sense of jubilation. Was there any of that, any celebration?
There was no celebration. And of course, the judge cautioned everyone in the beginning, because the public is in the courtroom as well, do not show any signs of either unhappiness or jubilation with those verdicts. And as they were read, the family, as I said, all they did was they really showed how they felt by touching each other. And, you know, and although Michael's father, Joe Jackson, kept his hands clasped and stared straight forward through the whole time the verdicts were being read. As we walked outside of the courtroom, then the other brothers and sisters were there. Jermaine was there, as well as Janet Jackson were there to greet the family as soon as they came out of the courtroom.
What about the jurors? Did they make eye contact with Jackson walking in, or did you see anything from them?
You couldn't. Jackson was looking directly at the jurors as they walked in. He seemed to be nodding somewhat, thanking them as they left, but the jurors seemed more conscious of acknowledging the alternates that were also there. All the alternates, all 8 alternates, were also in the courtroom at the time. But Jackson, as I said, very somber, very, as he has been through much of this trial. It's been very difficult to read his emotions, but certainly after he hugged his attorneys, you could see there was definitely some relief on his part.
What about Tom Sneddon, who had so much invested in this case, the man that decided to go forward despite the inadequacies, if you will, with the accuser and the accuser's family? Anything from him?
Nothing. It was when the prosecutors came in, they seemed very upbeat. When they initially came in, they were talking, back for a lot of smiling, that sort of thing, which contrasted really with when Tom Mesereau walked in with Michael Jackson. The two of them sat there in the courtroom staring straight ahead for maybe 10, 15 minutes before the judge and the jury came in, whereas the prosecutors had been talking with one another and smiling, that sort of thing. After the verdict was announced, just very grim-faced. They weren't looking at each other, just very grim-faced after hearing, because once you heard those first 2 counts, it was very clear where this jury was going.
Incredible. All right, Rusty Dornan inside the courtroom. Wolf?
All right, I just want to bring Rusty back. If Rusty can hear me, can she hear me, Ted?
Yeah, she can hear you.
Rusty, tell our viewers once again, and you were sitting inside the courtroom, the immediate reaction from Michael Jackson once that first count was read and the verdict was not guilty. You just recap briefly what you saw.
You cannot see. He keeps his face very straight towards the front of the room. He does not look from side to side. He did not appear to look at the jury after that first count was read, because the clerk who was reading them was on the other side of the courtroom. So you did not see him move. He appeared to be very somber. But the family, as I said, who was sitting directly in front of me, the relief on their part was immediately apparent. They were holding their mother, Catherine. They were touching her. Just an immediate sort of sigh of relief within the shoulders. They were the ones that you could really see some kind of reaction. But as far as Jackson was concerned, you could not see even any kind of sigh or anything like that. He just appeared straightforward the entire time all of the verdicts were being read. Wolf?
Well, and there was no audible, there's no noise, no cheering, no thank gods, no nothing like that. Everybody was totally silent as all 10 counts were read?
That's correct, because the judge had made such a strict admonishment that if any signs of jubilation were shown, that he would throw those people out of the courtroom. So everyone was very conscious of how they should behave in court, and there was really no audible or reaction within the courtroom when he began reading those counts, or the clerk when she began reading the counts.
And what about when the whole thing was over and the judge dismissed the jury? Were there cheers from the Jackson team and from Michael Jackson himself?
No, still no cheers. The first person he turned to was Robert Sanger to the left and gave him a very, very sort of mild hug. He then turned to Thomas Mesereau, who was on his right, also gave him a hug. The family stood up. They sort of all touched each other once again, and then they demanded, the court demanded that the media leave the courtroom. So at that point, I could not see the family actually interact with Michael Jackson when he was coming out of that courtroom area.
We just saw Thomas Mesereau, Rusty, and Ted get into a vehicle. Do we have any idea where he's going, what he's about to do? Because I anticipated he might be getting ready to make a statement to the press.
Yeah, we definitely anticipated something from the defense, especially if they came out victorious. They've been very tight-lipped throughout this, and we did expect that they would do something, make some sort of statement, whether that comes now in the next day or next few hours. I'm sure they're celebrating.
But it's difficult, as you know, because Michael Jackson's representative, who was speaking to the press, is no longer working for Michael Jackson. So we're kind of unsure of how we're going to be receiving word of this, right, Ted? I mean, whether is it going to come through the defense team? Or?
Right. Thomas Mesereau is a reserved man who is very skeptical of the media, and it seems as though the Jackson family, Mesereau, the defense team, is acting as though they have been vindicated, yes, but not pleased that this ever happened in the first place. And that's really been, at least Mesereau's attitude throughout this entire trial: come in, work hard, and almost in a way that he seemed upset that he had to be there.
It was interesting, too, that Joe Jackson, Michael's father, when he came in, he walked very slowly into the courtroom, and he looked at each and every member of the press that was sitting in all the sort of trying to get the people's faces and think, you know, if I'm going to remember you. That was sort of the feeling you got, because he was so studied as he did it and walked so slowly and looked at each person in each row thinking, you know, and it was the feeling of, I'm going to remember you no matter what happens in this case.
And we see the motorcade, Ted, hold on one second, Ted. The motorcade, this vehicle, this black vehicle, is heading back, we assume, to the Neverland Ranch, carrying Michael Jackson, a very elated Michael Jackson, not guilty on all 10 counts, read by the clerk just a little while ago. Very, very emotional moment for him, for his family, for all of his fans who were watching this jury and the deliberation. Ted Rowlands, and let me bring Rusty back for a moment. When the jury walked in, all 12 members, 8 women, 4 men, Rusty, did they make eye contact based on what you could tell with Michael Jackson going in to the announcement of the verdicts?
They seemed to, when they came in, they seemed to just take their seats. And as I said, they made eye contact with the alternates who were in the front row, because I saw one of the jurors wave at one of the alternates, and I saw one of the alternates who were sitting in the front row also wave at one of the jurors. Now, while the verdicts were being read, they did not look at Michael Jackson. They appeared to be looking right at the court clerk as she was reading. They did not appear to be looking at her. And I don't know if you heard actually the statement that apparently the jury made. I'm not sure if that came out on
we have
the
not
audio
heard
or
that.
not.
We have not heard that.
Okay.
But why don't you tell us? The only thing we heard, Rusty, and I want to make sure you know, the only thing we heard were the verdicts on the 10 counts read by the clerk. We didn't hear anything else.
Right. Well, they just talked about that they believe that this, hang on one second, I'm going to put my glasses on to read some of this, that they believe that it was that the testament to the belief in the justice system and the truth. And they, this is not all verbatim, I was taking this very quickly, but they also requested to return to their lives. They came out of their lives anonymously. They requested that they return to their lives anonymously. But they did want the judge to read this, that they felt that this entire procedure was a testament to their belief in the justice system and the truth. Now, the judge did go on to say that they were allowed to talk to anyone they wanted to, and that he actually urged them to talk, that he thought it was a good idea.
Right now it is.
Also, perhaps the defense or
from Nancy Baker of Larry King.
I encourage them to talk to them, and of course, and talk to the media as well.
Wolf, we just...
yeah, go ahead, Ted.
We just received a statement from Debbie Rowe, the mother of 2 of Michael Jackson's children, who was brought here and testified for the prosecution in this case. And many believe that that was one of the moments where the prosecution really, they seemed to be stunned by what Debbie Rowe had to say, because although she was a prosecution witness, she got up there and basically said that Michael Jackson was a wonderful father. Debbie Rowe is saying, quote, "Debbie is overjoyed that the justice system really works, regardless of which side called her to testify at the trial." That from Iris Finsilver, Debbie Rowe's attorney. One of the moments in this trial, Debbie Rowe's testimony, where people were literally scratching their heads saying, why was this witness called for the prosecution? Whether Debbie Rowe laid in wait and was a torpedo of sorts, doing it on purpose, or if it was she was not vetted out, we'll never know. But obviously she's weighing in now that she believes justice has been done.
Also, Wolf, I just did want to add that I had...
our viewers, Rusty, just to remind our viewers, because I know you were there together with Ted for virtually every step of the way, Debbie Rowe was called, the ex-wife of Michael Jackson, the mother of 2 of his children. Debbie Rowe was called to testify on behalf of the prosecution, but what she said, widely interpreted as helping Michael Jackson, the defense, given the loving nature of what she had to say about Michael Jackson.
And keep in mind, Wolf, that if Michael Jackson would have been found guilty, Debbie Rowe would have taken custody of the children, and she is currently in a custody fight with Michael Jackson for those children. So people were blown away by her testimony. It was so supportive of Jackson on the stand, and now, with the verdict in, again, she is showing her support, saying she's overjoyed.
Yeah, Wolf, I just wanted to add one thing that I didn't tell you about the jury statement, which was interesting, too, is they also said that we, the jury, have had the weight of the world on our shoulders, while we were making this decision, but we did it studiously and meticulously, that they studied the evidence, that they didn't want anyone to think that this was just some slam-bam thing, that they went through, they feel, every piece of evidence and really looked at it before they made that decision. So that was part of their statement that they released as well.
So, Rusty, based on the statement that was read on behalf of the 12 members of the jury, did you get the sense they would be making individual statements, speaking to the news media, or that was it?
Well, what happened is the judge told them that the representative for the media, Peter Chaplin, who's been the pool producer here, was going to go back with them and talk to them for about 2 minutes to tell them what to expect, which Peter Chaplin also did in the Peterson trial, just talk to the jurors, say, look, they don't bite. They just want to ask you a few questions. If you want to do it, we're happy to have you stay. If you don't want to do it, there's a place to go and you don't have to, and you can go home. So that's what he was doing right now. We'll have to see who actually shows up in that jury room for this jury press conference. We'll have to see who really does want to talk.
Our cameras, Rusty, did catch, and Ted, I want you to weigh on this as well. Thomas Snedden, the prosecutor, he was one of the first to get out of that courtroom after the verdicts were read. Here's a picture of him sort of bolting. There he is right there in the middle of the screen. He was basically one of the first to get out of there. This is not a good day, Ted, for him.
No, you can really see the grim faces, can't you, on the prosecution team?
Yeah, and all the way until this point here, that was all prosecution representatives. In fact, you still had one more coming out there. A lot of members of the prosecution team in court today, and they have been throughout, and they have put their heart and soul into this. They truly believe, they have a case, and they truly believe that the individual that they were going after, Michael Jackson, was indeed worthy of their attention and their hard work. They did work hard in their case, but I think clearly, for those of us who have been in this courtroom day after day after day, it makes sense. This verdict does when you analyze the victim's family. The J.C. Penney case, I think, is all you have to say, because what was proven in this case as fact by Thomas Mesereau is that this family had inconsistencies before in a very similar attitude, and I'm sure when we hear from jurors that will be a big factor.
I think there was the credibility issue, and when they went back to that jury room, reasonable doubt was just enough to sway them. But I mean, again, the prosecutors were incredible. I mean, their questioning was so dramatic at times. Yes.
I'm going to interrupt. Reverend Jesse Jackson's on the phone. He's been ministering to Michael Jackson. He's become a unofficial spokesman, I think we can say, for Michael Jackson. Give us your reaction, Reverend Jackson.
Well, it was a painful process and stressful at the very end. Michael called me this morning, and we talked and prayed as we often do, and he will call back again later this afternoon. But this has been an excruciating process. The time that the sheriff went into his home, in some sense invaded, occupied, and confiscated materials that ended up in the newsroom and in the courtroom. And kind of two trials at the same time, a courtroom trial and a newsroom trial, and he was tried and convicted in many newsrooms or many TV shows. And since it was not a sequestered jury, one did not know its impact upon the jury. The jury had the capacity in the end to discern innuendo and suggestion from fact. The accusers made some very, very strong charges, but each time on the cross-examination, they wilted. There was always a sense of some underscore which weakened their credibility. The jury has spoken, and I hope that many lessons will be learned from this. The healing process must begin. The Michael must assess the impact of the very impropriety of these problems that got him in this trouble. And we hope that all those involved now will learn a lesson, that we will go to another stage.
Were you expecting this not guilty verdict, Reverend Jackson, or were you bracing for guilty?
I was bracing for either, in the sense that if the trial used the standard of reasonable doubt, he would be acquitted. But then oftentimes jurors use political standards, not reasonable doubt standards, and there was a highly charged political environment in which all of this took place. I mean, the sheriff was unrelenting. He was not on the gag order. The DA was unrelenting. The judge gave them generous latitude to make their case over and over again. There were no African Americans on the jury.
Reverend Jack.
Hold on one second. I think we're breaking up. Reverend Jackson, I think our line may be breaking up. I don't know if you want to repeat that last thought, if you can still hear me. I think we've just lost Reverend Jackson. We're gonna try to reconnect with Reverend Jackson. Jesse Jackson on the phone with us has spent a lot of time in recent weeks with Michael Jackson, serving as an unofficial spokesman, ministering to him as well in these very, very difficult days, weeks leading up to this not guilty verdict on all 10 counts. I think the Reverend Al Sharpton is with us as well on the phone. Reverend Sharpton, are you there?
I'm here.
All right,
I'm in your studio.
You're in our studios in New York. Reverend Sharpton, give us your reaction.
Well, I think, in 2002, when Michael Jackson came to New York and we hosted him, we were castigated when he started saying that he felt they were coming after him because he raised questions about his owning the Beatles catalog and others. I think that this is a vindication for people that believe that people are innocent until proven guilty. And I think that there are no winners here. I don't think there's no reason for Michael or those opposing Michael to gloat. There's a lot of pain, a lot of hurt here. Children have been dragged into court. Michael's reputation has been damaged severely. But I think the criminal justice system worked this time. I think we can say that this jury, despite being inundated by media, despite the fact they were not sequestered, despite the fact there were questionable rulings by the judge, this jury said the evidence wasn't there and they acquitted him. I think this is good for America. And I don't think any of us that went on the line saying that Michael deserved the same right as any citizen are celebrating tonight anything other than the fact that people should have the right to be proven guilty of a crime, even if we disagree with their lifestyle.
Reverend
and that's
Sharpton,
what happened today.
Were you among those African-American leaders in this country who were expressed concern that were no African-American members on the jury?
Yes, I did. I expressed that concern, and I've expressed concern of what was behind this. A lot of people in the music industry that claimed that for years there were things going on. They never said that, while Michael was not talking back or not raising questions as he did when he came to our headquarters in Harlem. And I felt that he was being vilified and in many ways lynched by the media. I think today showed that there can be a speck of grass grow even through concrete, and that people are going to be balanced and fair if given the opportunity. I think that they showed tremendous courage. Those 12 jurors who may go into a community that disagrees with them, some of them vehemently, but they upheld the best in the American jurisprudence system by saying if the evidence wasn't there, despite whatever biases I may or may not have, I'm not going to use the system to make a statement. I'm going to use the system to convict people if they're guilty of a crime.
Jeffrey Toobin is here with me. Reverend Sharpton, our senior legal analyst, has a question for you.
Reverend Sharpton, do you think, Michael Jackson has said that he thinks it's appropriate for him to sleep in the same bed as boys who are 12, 13 years old. Do you think he ought to stop doing that?
I think that Michael now can have time to reflect and think a lot of deliberate moves as he goes forward. The question is, Jeffrey, that whether or not it was a crime for him to say that. Whatever my feelings, I talked to Michael. I've been to Neverland, and I've had advice for Michael, pro and con. The issue here was not my advice as a minister or even as a man. The issue here was whether he committed a crime. That should be proven. Otherwise, it would set a precedent that anyone could make an accusation against any public figure, and we'd be thrown into jail or convicted just based on media hysteria rather than hard evidence. That's what was frightening to me about the condition of this trial.
I want you to stand by, Reverend Sharpton. Stephen Clark is with us from Mountain View, California, a former prosecutor, now a criminal defense attorney. He's been inside that courtroom. He's been watching this case. Stephen Clark, give us your reaction. How surprised, if you were surprised, were you?
Well, actually, I wasn't surprised on many of the counts being not guilty. Frankly, after watching the prosecution's case in court, there left a lot to be desired, and there clearly was reasonable doubt. I thought that the jury may hang on two of the more serious child molest counts that the young boy described. And the reason I say that is because the prior act's evidence was quite compelling as to two of the young boys, and I thought that the jury, that some members of that jury may say, look, Michael Jackson's a pedophile, and I'm going to give the prosecution a chance to get this right next time. But frankly, the conspiracy count was an anchor around the prosecution's case. They made a serious strategic mistake bringing it in the first place, and I think that's really what happened here. The jury just said, look, I'm not going to give the mother and the accuser the keys to Michael Jackson's bank account in this situation. They were disliked. So I think that conspiracy count was a big mistake. And I'm frankly a little surprised that there weren't some jurors that felt that he did molest the young boy. But I'm not surprised on the other counts being not guilty.
Stephen Clark, the bottom line, though, and I think you can boil it down to this, is that jury simply did not believe the accuser, who was 13 years old and is now 16 years old. They simply didn't believe this young man.
Well, there was certainly enough doubt as to his testimony. They may believe him, and I'm not sure that when they do finally speak, they're going to say, we think Michael Jackson is without fault in this situation. I think that clearly they would say, he's got a lot of personal problems. He shouldn't be sleeping in bed. Maybe he did this, but frankly, on the basis of this boy's testimony, when you look at the reasonable doubt standard, before you put somebody in jail, that's the standard you have. I think they just said, look, we cannot believe him beyond a reasonable doubt. when you look at the other evidence that called into question his credibility, and particularly the influence that the mother apparently had on him over prior occasions in that JCPenney case. So they may have believed him in the sense of sitting around and discussing it at a cocktail party, but when you look at that reasonable doubt standard, they had to go in favor of the defense unless they were convinced beyond a reasonable doubt.
I'm going to have you stand by, Stephen, as well. Deborah Opry is standing by. She's in Santa Maria outside the courthouse, a spokeswoman for the Michael Jackson family, for the Michael Jackson team. Deborah, give us your reaction.
Are we ready here, guys? I am not shocked. I expected it. Did I cry? Yeah. Am I going to cry again? Yeah. After a year, the stress is just melting away, and I'm so happy for Catherine, Joe, Michael, LaToya, Janet, Tito, Jackie, Jermaine, and Randy. What a family, and what a jury, and what an attorney, and Tom Mesereau and his crew. I'm
Deborah,
so
did
proud
you have
tonight.
a chance? Did you have a chance to speak with Michael since the not guilty verdicts were announced?
I spoke with the family as they were exiting, and they're all very happy and very relieved. And I have to make sure.
Did they tell you, Deborah, what their game plan is now? Are they going to make a statement? Will we hear from Michael?
Their game plan was to get into the SUVs and go home.
And just to relax and to absorb what has happened. When you say you weren't surprised, you have to admit you were a little surprised, Deborah, weren't you?
No. I expected the acquittal. The media pundits are, they have their own courtroom, the courtroom of public opinion. It's not fair, it's not right, and I took this cause on because I believe the jury trial should be in a courtroom.
Deborah, give us one additional thought right now as you look back on these 14 weeks of the trial. What was the biggest mistake from your perspective that the prosecution made?
They brought charges against Michael Jackson with the wrong accuser.
He was not credible, is that what you're saying, the young boy?
That's absolutely what I'm saying.
All right, Deborah Opry is an attorney for the Jackson family, spending a few moments as well. Thomas Snedden is the prosecutor. He's speaking right now.
And I've been a prosecutor for 37 years, and 37 years I've never quarreled with a jury's verdict, and I'm not going to start today. So basically, that's all we really have to say. I'll answer a few questions, but I'm probably not going to remain too long. So if anybody has a question far away,
I think we're going to start over
see
here.
how it goes.
Can you hear me okay?
I certainly can.
Right. Have you spoken with the accuser and his family, and if so, what was their mood and the reaction to the verdict today?
No, as to all.
Can you address the defense's allegation throughout the trial that you rushed into this prosecution because of your past history with Mr. Jackson?
My past history of Mr. Jackson had absolutely, unequivocally, nothing to do with our evaluation of this particular case. That's been a nice little 30-second soundbite that the media has used to try to justify this thing, but it had never had anything to do with either the sheriff's investigation or our decision to file.
Can you address the fans' claim that the Santa Barbara DA was somehow trying to frame Michael Jackson, and all of this really is an elaborate scheme to frame Michael Jackson and make him look guilty?
I just answered that question.
Mr. Snedden, in retrospect, do you think you had the wrong family on the stand?
I don't know how much work you do in the criminal justice system, but the system I worked in for 37 years is that people come in and they're the victims of crime. We don't select our victims, and we don't select the families they come from. What we do is we evaluate the case. We try to make a conscientious decision as to whether or not we have enough evidence to go forward. And that's what we did in this case. We've done it in every other case since I've been the district attorney in this county, and we will continue to do that as long as I'm district attorney of this county.
So you stand by what the family said in court?
I think that's evident.
There have been a lot of claims that because of the gag order, you haven't been able to address. I mean, fans have, even Jackson's mother has said that you have some involvement with the Ku Klux Klan. Fans have claimed that you have relatives who are among the witnesses. Do you want to address any of those now that you finally can?
They're all false. We all did our job. We did it conscientiously. And anybody who knows Tom Snedden, knows Gordon Auchincloss, and knows Ron Zonin, and the things that we've done in our community and the families that we have, knows all of that to be untrue. And if people would simply take the time to investigate the allegation before they print it, they'd know it's untrue also.
Have you looked into, and do you have concerns of reports that at least one of the jurors was peddling a book deal?
I had heard that.
You had heard that?
Yes.
And did you have concerns about that? And was it looked into?
Let's just say that it was taken care of by the court.
Would you reflect for just one moment on the conspiracy charge? Do you think that it might have been a better case without conspiracy, only child molestation?
I've learned a very expensive lesson in life a long time ago. That is, you never look back, you always look forward.
Tom, is this the end of your office pursuing Michael Jackson?
No comment.
What do you do now?
I don't think you want to know. I've been told not to crack any jokes, so we go back to work. We got a lot of cases that have been pending. I have an office to run. We're having budget hearings today. We're professionals, and we'll continue to act as professionals the way we act professionally in this case. And I'm not going to look back and apologize for anything we've done. We did a very conscientious, thorough job, as did the Sheriff's Department, investigating this case.
Would you answer the question whether witnesses that you put on the stand surprised you when they testified?
I mean, I'm not going to get into the trial. I just say that the experience of any trial lawyer like Gordon or Ron or anybody in my office, for that matter, who tries felonies is you never have a case where a witness, you don't get some surprises on both sides in both ways. And I think Mr. Mesereau would tell you the same thing. And that's a product of being a trial lawyer, and you learn to adjust and you go on.
Why did you go ahead with the case when you knew the mother in particular to be such a troublesome witness?
I don't think the media generally understands the responsibility of a prosecutor. And I'll answer it this way, and the simple thing is, when a victim comes in and the victim tells you they've been victimized, and you believe that, and you believe that the evidence supports that, you don't look at their pedigree. We look at what we think is what's right. You do the right things for the right reasons. If it doesn't work out, that's why we have a jury system. But we did the right thing for the right reasons.
Do you have any problem with the judge reading the jury notes privately without releasing to the media last Friday and having that?
Listen, the judge is the judge. He has the prerogative to do and run his court the way he wants. I have no criticism of the judge.
Do you think that's constitutional and you don't have any problem with that?
You know, Greta, I just, you know, the judge has done what he's done, and that's the way we have to live with what, as you know, what the judge does. I have no criticism of the judge whatsoever, none.
Tom, if there were pivotal moments in the trial when you thought it was going one way or the other, what were they?
I didn't think there were any.
Mr. Snedden?
I didn't. I just that the case
if you
went
had
on.
If someone came to you now with strong allegations of molestation on the part of Michael Jackson, what would you do?
We'd review it like any other case we review in our office, just like we reviewed this one.
You wouldn't shy from it now?
Well, the answer to the question truthfully is I probably wouldn't if it was a good case. But I think we all learned some lessons here that we thought we had a good case this time. And we thought we did a conscientious job, and the Sheriff's Department did a remarkable job of investigating it. But no, the people in this county elected me to do a job, and I've tried to do that conscientiously. And I'll continue to do that the same way.
Child molester has escaped unpunished?
No comment. Okay?
Do you hope that Mr. Jackson leaves Santa Barbara County?
No comment.
Can I just ask, what was your assessment of the defense team and how they did in this trial?
I absolutely have no comment about that.
Do you have any estimate on the cost?
No.
You mentioned you'd learned some lessons. What lessons have you learned?
Well, I was referring probably more than anything else to the celebrity factor.
Can you elaborate?
I'm not the Lone Ranger in that faction.
Why does it take so long to try this case?
Actually, I thought the case went pretty fast, considering what the original estimates were. We were in trial for February, March, April, May.
So you don't think trials seem to take a little longer in California than?
Well, they definitely take a lot longer than they do in the South.
I'll give you that one.
Well.
Tom, when you walked into the courtroom, did you have an inkling what the verdict was?
No.
No?
We obviously had our aspirations, but certainly I had no inkling.
You mentioned the celebrity factor. Do you think that's played a key part?
Well, it seems to us it would, but maybe we're just looking for explanations in the wrong places. I don't know. Okay, any other questions? If you don't, we have some unfinished business. All right, thank you very much.
District Attorney Thomas Snedden Jr. speaking to reporters after a California jury acquitted Michael Jackson of all 10 counts against him at the conclusion of his 4-month trial on child molestation charges. Hello and welcome. I'm Jonathan Mann. We're breaking away now from CNN's U.S. network to begin CNN International's coverage of what we've learned from the Jackson trial. For more than a decade, there have been rumors and reports that Michael Jackson was doing odd things with children. Jackson himself appeared in a documentary holding hands with one boy and told an interviewer he brought children into his bed, though the time spent there, he said, was entirely innocent. That boy went to court to accuse Jackson of molesting him. The state of California raided Jackson's Neverland Ranch a number of times and ultimately brought 10 charges against him. It failed to convince the jury of a single one, a stunning and complete defeat handed down just a short time ago. On this special extended edition of Insight, Michael Jackson, not guilty. The verdicts were announced a little less than an hour ago. Let's listen to the way the court heard the results.
We, the jury in the above entitled case, find the defendant not guilty of conspiracy as charged in count 1 of the indictment, dated June 13th, 2005, foreperson number 80. Count 2, verdict. We, the jury in the above entitled case, find the defendant not guilty of a lewd act upon a minor child as charged in count 2 of the indictment, dated June 13th, 2005, foreperson number 80. Count 3, verdict. We, the jury in the above entitled case, find the defendant not guilty of a lewd act upon a minor child as charged in count 3 of the indictment, dated June 13th, 2005, foreperson number 80. Count 4, verdict. We, the jury in the above entitled case, find the defendant not guilty of lewd act upon a minor child as charged in count 4 of the indictment, dated June 10th, 2005, foreperson number 80. Count 5, verdict. We, the jury in the above entitled case, find the defendant not guilty of a lewd act upon a minor child as charged in count 5 of the indictment, dated June 10th, 2005, foreperson number 80. Count 6, verdict. We, the jury in the above entitled case, find the defendant not guilty of attempting to commit a lewd act upon a minor child as charged in count 6 of the indictment, dated June 13th, 2005, foreperson number 80. Count 7, verdict. We, the jury in the above entitled case, find the defendant not guilty of administering an intoxicating agent to assist in the commission of a felony as charged in count 7 of the indictment, dated June 13th, 2005, foreperson number 80. Count 7, verdict, lesser offense. We, the jury in the above entitled case, find the defendant not guilty of providing alcoholic beverages to persons under the age of 21, a lesser included offense of that charge in count 7 of the indictment, dated June 13th, 2005, foreperson number 80. Count 8, verdict. We, the jury in the above entitled case, find the defendant not guilty of administering an intoxicating agent to assist in the commission of a felony as charged in count 8 of the indictment, dated June 13, 2005, foreperson number 80. Count 8, verdict, lesser offense. We, the jury in the above entitled case, find the defendant not guilty of providing alcoholic beverages to persons under the age of 21, a lesser included offense that charged in count 8 of the indictment, dated June 13, 2005, foreperson number 80. Count 9, verdict. We, the jury in the above entitled case, find the defendant not guilty of administering an intoxicating agent to assist in the commission of a felony as charged in count 9 of the indictment, dated June 10, 2005, foreperson number 80. Count 9, verdict, lesser offense. We, the jury in the above entitled case, find the defendant not guilty of providing alcoholic beverages to persons under the age of 21, a lesser included offense of that charge in count 9 of the indictment, dated June 10th, 2005, for person number 80. Count 10, verdict. We, the jury in the above entitled case, find the defendant not guilty of administering an intoxicating agent to assist in the commission of a felony as charged in count 10 of the indictment, dated June 10th, 2005, for person number 80. Count 10, verdict, lesser offense. We, the jury in the above entitled case, find the defendant not guilty of providing alcoholic beverages to persons under the age of 21, a lesser included offense of that charge in count 10 of the indictment.
There were no cameras allowed in the courtroom in Santa Maria, California, and a microphone only long enough to record those verdicts being read. But CNN's Rusty Dornan was in court when the jury returned the not guilty verdict. Here's how she described it.
Absolutely incredible, as it always is, as you know, in those courtrooms. You could not hear a sound in the courtroom as the judge was ripping open each of the verdict messages, because he had to look at them first before he had the clerk read them. And the only sound in the courtroom you could hear was the tearing of these envelopes. Meantime, I was sitting just behind the family, behind Catherine and Joe Jackson and Tito, and then in front of them, LaToya, his sister, and Randy, his brother. Now, just as the clerk is about to read the verdicts, all the kids reached around. Tito had his arm around his mother. LaToya reached her hand around. They all were touching Catherine Jackson, Michael's mother. She started to break. As soon as they heard the first not guilty, she broke down and started to cry. They all kept sort of grabbing her and holding her. And from that point on, really, there was no other sound in the courtroom other than that clerk reading those not guilty verdicts. Now, Michael Jackson, you could not see his expression. He appeared very somber, but at the end, he did turn. He hugged his attorney, Robert Sanger, then, of course, also hugged Thomas Mesereau, but it still appeared very somber. As you can see, when he was leaving, he was blowing kisses to the fans and that sort of thing. But absolutely incredible moment in the courtroom, and, of course, for his family, for him, for what they've been going through for the past few months.
Walking out, the family did not, by any stretch of the imagination, raise their hands up. There wasn't a sense of jubilation. Was there any of that, any celebration?
There was no celebration. And of course, the judge cautioned everyone in the beginning, because the public is in the courtroom as well, do not show any signs of either unhappiness or jubilation with those verdicts. And as they were read, the family, as I said, all they did was they really showed how they felt by touching each other. And, and although Michael's father, Joe Jackson, kept his hands clasped and stared straight forward through the whole time the verdicts were being read. As we walked outside of the courtroom, then the other brothers and sisters were there. Jermaine was there, as well as Janet Jackson, were there to greet the family as soon as they came out of the courtroom.
What about the jurors? Did they make eye contact with Jackson walking in, or did you see anything from them?
You couldn't. Jackson was looking directly at the jurors as they walked in. He seemed to be nodding somewhat, thanking them as they left, but the jurors seemed more conscious of acknowledging the alternates that were also there. All the alternates, all 8 alternates, were also in the courtroom at the time. But Jackson, as I said, very somber, as he has been through much of this trial. It's been very difficult to read his emotions, but certainly after he hugged his attorneys, you could see there was definitely some relief on his part.
What about Tom Sneddon, who had so much invested in this case, the man that decided to go forward despite the inadequacies, if you will, with the accuser and the accuser's family? Anything from him?
Nothing. It was when the prosecutors came in, they seemed very upbeat. When they initially came in, they were talking, going back for a lot of smiling, that sort of thing, which contrasted really with when Tom Mesereau walked in with Michael Jackson. The two of them sat there in the courtroom staring straight ahead for maybe 10, 15 minutes before the judge and the jury came in, whereas the prosecutors had been talking with one another and smiling, that sort of thing. After the verdict was announced, just very grim-faced. They weren't looking at each other, just very grim face after hearing, because once you heard those first 2 counts, it was very clear where this jury was going.
Rusty Dornan, not guilty 10 times over. And then a convoy of black sport utility vehicles bearing Michael Jackson and his entourage from the courthouse to his Neverland Ranch, ending one of the stranger trials that this country has seen in recent years. Peter Viles has this look back.
Which image will you remember? Maybe Michael Jackson jumping on the roof of his SUV to salute his fans? Maybe the day he showed up in his pajamas so late for court he almost got arrested? Or the parade of celebrities to the Santa Maria courthouse. Jay Leno, Macaulay Culkin, Larry King. The circus atmosphere at times almost overshadowed the seriousness of the charges against him.
In violation of the California Penal Code, commonly known as child molestation.
The state alleges that over several weeks in 2003 at his Neverland Ranch, Jackson molested a 13-year-old boy after plying him with alcohol. In all, Jackson faces 10 felony charges, 4 counts of molestation, 1 count of attempted molestation, 4 counts related to alcohol, and a conspiracy charge that Jackson conspired to hold the boy and his family captive inside Neverland. Over time, Jackson did switch lawyers, but not defenses.
Michael Jackson is unequivocally and absolutely innocent of these charges.
The accuser's younger brother testified he saw Jackson groping his brother while the boy was asleep. Then the alleged victim, now 15, testified facing down the pop star and telling the jury Jackson sexually abused him on several occasions.
It was a little bit of a stare down going on between the boy and Michael Jackson during the testimony, whereas at times before that, the boy would talk to the jury. If you notice, when he was talking about that molestation, and especially on cross-examination, he was looking at Michael Jackson.
Another prosecution witness testified he saw Jackson perform oral sex on another boy, and yet another witness testified he had been fondled by Jackson as a boy.
He broke down. He said, "This is very hard for me. It's taken a lot of counseling." He was very believable, and he was dynamite for the prosecution.
The Jackson defense was really an attack, painting the accuser and his family as manipulative scam artists. The key confrontation, Thomas Mesereau's cross-examination of the alleged victim's mother.
She really backfired for prosecutors. She was very brassy on the stand. She was argumentative, and also she reeked of insincerity. You just didn't believe her story. She was too ham-boned. She turned and addressed the jurors very dramatically every time she answered a question. She argued with the lead defense attorney, Tom Mesereau. She just imploded on the stand.
Called by the prosecution, Jackson's ex-wife, Debbie Rowe, seemed to help the defense. She called Jackson a wonderful father who was manipulated by, quote, vultures around him. Defense witness Macaulay Culkin portrayed Jackson as harmless, saying he did sleep in Jackson's bed but was never molested. Jackson never testified, so he was never cross-examined, but jurors did hear from him through videotapes played for the jury, in which Jackson declared what he called his pure love for children. Peter Viles for CNN, Los Angeles.
And once again, if you're just joining us, the pop star Michael Jackson has been found not guilty on all 10 charges by a jury in Santa Maria, California. CNN's Chris Wolf is standing by outside the courtroom. It sounded like pandemonium out there for a while.
It was, John, indeed. Hundreds and hundreds of people surrounded this court complex for the reading of the verdict. As they heard that a verdict had been reached earlier today, they started to flock to the courthouse for the reading of the verdict. They were cheering for Michael Jackson. Most of them obviously were Michael Jackson fans. They would cheer that Michael is innocent, Michael is innocent. He left the courthouse surrounded by his entire family, all of his sisters and his brothers and his parents, of course. They were thrilled at the outcome of this trial. Michael Jackson left here a free man.
Michael Jackson will not be going to jail for child molestation, but he may be locked in another kind of prison, one of his own making.
I think at some level Michael feels a sense of betrayal by those who he trusted the most, who in some sense turned on him.
And the entertainer could face a new battle from the accuser's family.
Expect a big civil lawsuit. If that family can hit on the civil lawsuit, they could end up owning Neverland, chimpanzees, spiders, and all.
The world watched the circus known as the Michael Jackson trial for the last 4 months. 141 witnesses testified, including actor Macaulay Culkin and comedian Jay Leno for the defense. Some observers called this the trial of the videotapes. Jurors saw the documentary Living with Michael Jackson, in which he admitted to sharing his bed with young boys in a non-sexual way, although the charges relate to alleged molestation that occurred after the documentary aired. Later, jurors watched a videotaped police interview in which the young accuser tells detectives that Michael Jackson molested him. And then there were pictures of young nude boys found at Neverland Ranch.
His life has been laid bare in the courtroom, and it really is a sad life.
Testing 1 2 3. Testing 1 2 3. Testing.
After this entire episode has gone and ended, Michael Jackson. We've apparently lost Chris Wolf and his audio. We're going to try and reestablish things. Our coverage of the verdict in the Michael Jackson trial will continue right after this break.
Michael Jackson will be walking out of this courtroom a free man, not guilty on the more serious charges, the lesser charges, administering alcohol, a misdemeanor, a slam dunk against the prosecution.
The next revolutionary. The next visionary. The next person